What's going on with you two? I exclaimed as I walked in from work, only to find my husband and daughter sprawled on the living room floor. What's wrong? I rushed to their side, panic rising in my chest. They were both in the midst of a seizure, struggling to breathe. Without hesitation, I dialed for paramedics, and they were swiftly transported for treatment. As we rushed to the hospital, I was bombarded with questions, but all I could offer were fragmented observations. I was as clueless as anyone about what had caused this sudden collapse. In the hospital, as the doctors tended to them, I was ushered into a separate room, heart pounding with dread. "Are they okay?" I asked, desperation lacing my voice. "They'll be fine," the doctor assured me, especially Bonnie. The gravity of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. My strength seemed to evaporate at the doctor's words. From that moment, I was thrust into a whirlwind of uncertainty. My name is Wendy, and for the past 5 years, I've been married to Harley, living with our daughter Bonnie. I met Harley during my days as a post office clerk. He frequented the office to send out his handmade items for sale on a flea market app. What began as mere clerical exchanges gradually evolved into conversations, and soon I learned his name. After one routine transaction, Harley left me a piece of paper, hastily scrawled with his phone number. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. Eventually, curiosity won over, and I dialed the number. "Hello!" His voice on the other end was a mix of surprise and anticipation. "Is this Wendy?" he asked. "Yes, it's me. Did you give me your number?" I couldn't help but chuckle. I had been jittery before making the call, but somehow, those nerves dissipated as soon as we began talking. Before I knew it, an hour had flown by, and Harley casually asked me out on a date for the following week. "Next week sounds perfect," I replied, feeling a surge of excitement. "I'm looking forward to it." And so our dates became a regular occurrence. With each outing, we grew closer, our connection deepening organically. It wasn't long before our companionship blossomed into something more meaningful. There were no grand declarations of love, just a gradual understanding between us. When I was 26 and Harley was 28, he proposed. My response was an enthusiastic yes. I envisioned a blissful married life ahead of us, but reality had other plans. "I'm glad your parents were so welcoming," Harley remarked as we walked towards my childhood home. "I hope mine will be too." "I'm not so sure about that," I admitted, "but let's hope for the best." As we entered, my parents greeted us warmly, offering their congratulations. It was a heartwarming moment until my sister, Muriel, appeared. "Did you forget to tell Mr. Harley about me?" she teased, catching me off guard. "I'm sorry, I should have explained," I stammered, feeling a pang of guilt for not preparing Harley. Once the confusion was cleared up, pleasantries were exchanged, but little did I know, this encounter would unravel into a nightmare. Afterwards, my sister and I discussed the situation. Our relationship had never been particularly close, especially after I left home to support our ailing mother. I had sacrificed my education fund for her medical expenses, a decision she couldn't comprehend. I harbor no regrets about the choice I made. Sacrificing my education fund for my ailing mother was a decision I stand by. However, Meryl didn't take kindly to it. That moment became a turning point in our relationship. Despite having walked similar paths until then, from that juncture, we drifted apart. Our communication dwindled, and we seldom kept in touch. Even during occasional visits home, we made a point to avoid each other as much as possible. That dynamic remained unchanged. Yet, strangely, she seemed genuinely pleased about my marriage. "I thought this might break the ice," I remarked, attempting to lighten the tension. "That's nice. I wish I could find someone like Harley," she mused wistfully. "I'm sure you'll meet someone wonderful," I reassured her. But her response caught me off guard. "Actually, I think he may have already appeared," she hinted with an enigmatic smile that lingered in my mind. And so our married life began. With the arrival of our daughter, we reached the pinnacle of happiness. However, as time passed, subtle changes crept into our lives. Harley started coming home unusually late and began venturing out more frequently, even on holidays. Then, tragedy struck. Upon returning from work one day, I found both my husband and daughter lying unconscious in the living room. Panic surged through me as I rushed to their side, calling for help. Paramedics arrived swiftly, whisking them away for treatment. What happened? I asked frantically as they were taken to the hospital. I don't know, I confessed, my mind reeling with fear and confusion. At the hospital, after hours of agonizing wait, the doctor finally called me aside. Are they okay? I asked, bracing myself for the worst. They're stable now, the doctor assured me, but they've suffered from acute nicotine pesticide poisoning. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived as the gravity of the situation sank in. Caught in a whirlwind of emotions, I found myself grappling with an unexpected turn of events. I am sorry, I mumbled, struggling to process the ordeal. I was taken aback by the diagnosis. What is acute nicotine pesticide poisoning? I inquired, my voice trembling with worry. It's a poisoning caused by ingesting an ingredient found in pesticides, the doctor explained. Symptoms include dizziness, convulsions, and difficulty breathing. Dread gripped me as I absorbed the severity of the situation. The doctors bombarded me with questions, probing for any clues about what could have caused it. But I was at a loss. I couldn't even recall what they had eaten before I arrived home. They were admitted to the hospital for further examination, but the next day brought a new wave of distress. Police officers arrived at our home. What's going on? I demanded, my heart racing with anxiety. This case appears to be more than just an accident. One officer stated, we'll be investigating it as a potential crime. Can you tell us exactly how you found them? Their scrutinizing gazes made me uneasy. It was clear they harbored suspicions, though I couldn't fathom why. Nevertheless, I cooperated with their inquiries, hoping to dispel any doubts. During the search, an officer discovered pesticides in our trash can. I don't know anything about this, I protested, genuine confusion clouding my mind. I don't remember buying it. Despite my protests, I was escorted to the police station for further questioning. I reasoned that fleeing would only deepen their suspicions. At the station, they took my fingerprints, which were later matched to those found on the pesticide container. I was detained pending the results. Anxiety gnawed at me as I awaited the outcome. When the results came back, the officer's words struck me like a blow. Your fingerprints match those on the pesticide, he declared. You're now a suspect in an attempted murder case. I was stunned. How could this be? I couldn't comprehend why my fingerprints were on the pesticide, let alone why I would harm my own family. As I sat in the interrogation room, my mind raced with confusion and fear. The interrogation stretched on, each question digging deeper into my actions on that fateful day. It started like any other day. I began, my voice trembling. I went to work at the post office as usual. After my usual lunch at a nearby cafe, which lasted about an hour, I returned home. I recounted to the officer. He seemed satisfied, but then he asked about the day before. That afternoon, I went to a nearby supermarket and bought a cake, I explained. After that, I went straight home. The officer then presented me with a laptop. Take a look at this, he said, showing me a video clip from a surveillance camera at a store. In the footage, a woman stood in front of a shelf stocked with pesticides. Is that not you in the video? The officer inquired. My heart skipped a beat as I scrutinized the screen. What is this? Why, it's me, I gasped. But then realization dawned on me. No, wait, this is not me. The officers exchanged incredulous glances. Are you sure? One asked cautiously. I pointed to the screen, where I noticed a detail. Look here, I urged, indicating a mole near the woman's mouth. I don't have a mole. This isn't me. It's my twin sister, Meryl. The revelation stunned even the police. Your twin sister. They echoed in disbelief. As they reviewed the evidence, they found footage of me at the supermarket wearing the same clothes as the woman in the video. However, no one outside my family would know if I had left the house dressed like that. It all makes sense now, I murmured. That's what it meant. Concern flooded me as I realized the implications. What has happened to my husband? I inquired anxiously. If he's out of the hospital and back at home, please check on him immediately. I believe he's been seeing my sister. The officer looked taken aback. How can you be so sure? Taking a deep breath, I explained, because they're having an affair. They're trying to frame me. But your husband is a victim too, isn't he? That way, suspicion would be diverted. The gravity of the situation seemed to dawn on the police. We'll need to investigate further, the officer conceded. I understand, I replied. But please check on both of them. It'll reveal everything. I understood that I was being detained. Typically, I would have been arrested immediately, but they decided to hold off on my arrest, recognizing the significance of my testimony. It felt like I was hanging on by a thread. 2 days later, I was summoned back to the interrogation room. As you suspected, we looked into your husband and found evidence of an affair, the officer informed me. We spoke to him, and he confessed to everything. I'm sorry about this, the officer continued. It was our oversight. For the time being, I was exonerated, but the ordeal was far from over. The betrayal by Harley and Meryl cut deep, especially considering they had implicated my young daughter. I knew I had to confront Harley. You've done a despicable thing, I told him, struggling to contain my anger. I can't believe you involved Bonnie in this to frame me. Meryl must have been behind this. Indeed, it turned out that Meryl had orchestrated the entire scheme. She had suggested preparing pesticides to frame me as a murderer. Harley, under her influence, had bought the pesticide and laced the cake with it while I was away at work, just as I had come to visit him. So, where is Meryl? I demanded. I don't know, Harley confessed. I couldn't reach her before the police took me. She must have run away. You'll pay for your crimes, I warned him. You're not getting away with this. As expected, Meryl had disappeared, but the police eventually found her hiding out at a man's home she had met through a dating service. She was taken to the police station, where she confessed to everything. I rushed to the police station to confront her. Meryl, why did you do this to me? Because I've never liked you since you left, she spat back. Then she revealed her resentment, explaining how she felt inferior to me for sacrificing my education for our family's sake. Despite the pain and betrayal, I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for my sister. Her negative feelings towards me had festered over time, culminating in incidents like this one. Was that why you approached Harley? I asked, struggling to comprehend her motives. I just thought that if I slept with your husband, you would despair, she confessed coldly. When he came to greet me at the wedding, I knew I could manipulate him. In other words, she didn't choose Harley for who he was. She chose him because he was my husband. He said he was going to be with you when I was gone. That stupid man had a crush on me. I just made it easy for me to take advantage of him, she continued, devoid of remorse. I can't forgive Harley, but still, he was just being used by her. Despite the betrayal, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity for Harley. Why did you target Bonnie? I demanded, struggling to contain my anger. Of course, it's because she's your daughter, she retorted, callously confirming my suspicions. Well, whatever the reason, what you did is unforgivable. You'll pay for it for the rest of your life, I vowed, my voice trembling with anger. With those words, she was taken away. The trial of Harley and Meryl commenced. My husband was accused of framing me for attempted murder and faced numerous charges. In the end, he was sentenced to prison, including payment of alimony. Meryl, too, faced trial, and despite her execution, she would soon serve her sentence and come out. However, even if they atoned for their crimes, the scars of their actions would linger. They would forever be labeled as ex-convicts. Meanwhile, my parents offered to move in with us. Would you and Bonnie like to come live with us? My mother proposed. I think your mom would be happy if you did. Though hesitant at first, I accepted her offer for my mother's sake, who was exhausted from the ordeal. With my mother's recovery and Bonnie's cheerful presence, our new life together began. From now on, the four of us would reside in a new house, finding happiness together.
This is going to be our home now. The rest of the stuff is coming today, so please take care of it." "What? Why are you making these decisions on your own?" "Oh, by the way, Anna is coming too, so make sure to welcome her." I had noticed that my husband's family started visiting more often after we moved into the fancy high-rise condo, but I never expected anything like this. As soon as my husband came home from work, I asked him, "Is your mother and her family going to live here?" "Oh yeah, that's happening today, isn't it?" he replied casually. "What are you talking about?" I was shocked. "Didn't I mention it? They're moving in with us today." "Haha," he laughed, not realizing how upset I was. I was speechless. "Don't just stand there. Get ready to make dinner. We're celebrating today." At that point, I was furious. How could he think this was okay? "We can live here because of me, you know," I said. "What are you talking about?" "That's not true," he argued back. As we were talking, my mother-in-law arrived. "If you hate living with us so much, why don't you just leave?" she said, throwing an envelope on the table. "What's this?" I asked. "It's severance money from us, $110,000. Take it, get divorced, and leave. We'll keep the house," she said, smirking with her family. At that moment, I made up my mind. They're such fools. I'm so lucky, I thought. "Understood. I'll leave right away," I said. I quickly packed my bags and left the house, feeling overjoyed. But this wasn't the end. I couldn't stop laughing, thinking about what would happen to my in-laws next. My name is Sarah, and I work as a bank employee. I thought I would have a happy life married to Kevin, but marriage doesn't always go as planned. I realized this when I first met my mother-in-law. "So, you're Sarah. What do you do for a living?" "I'm a bank employee," I replied. "Oh, a bank employee, huh? I guess you don't have to be too smart to do that," she said, clearly trying to put me down. This happened the first time we met before the wedding. Kevin, sitting next to me, acted like he didn't hear and just smoked his cigarette. "Well, let's get along from now on," she said. Yes, nice to meet you," I replied, wondering if everything would be okay. But after we got married, my husband was kind, and we didn't have to interact much with my mother-in-law. "Are you sure it was a good idea to marry a man with such a modest salary?" she asked out of nowhere one day. "What's wrong all of a sudden?" I asked. "Well, my mom used to say such things, but now I just feel pathetic." "It's okay, don't worry," I assured him. Kevin had always been insecure, even when we were dating. He was intimidated when he found out I was a bank employee, but I never cared much about my partner's financial status. Since then, we've had a modest but fun life. "What are you planning to do about where we live?" my father asked me a few months after we got married. "I think we're fine as we are now. We don't have any particular needs," I replied. "Actually, a spot has opened up in the high-rise condo. What do you think?" he asked. A high-rise condo? I was surprised. My father owned a high-rise condo. He was a company president but had handed over the business to my brother and was now living a relaxed life. Of course, my husband knew about this. "If you're interested, you can move in immediately." "Got it. I'll discuss it with Kevin," I said. I talked to Kevin that night. "Kevin, are you interested in living in a high-rise condo?" "A high-rise condo? It would be amazing to live in such a place," Kevin said, showing excitement I hadn't seen before. Seeing him smile made me happy too. "Actually, my dad offered us to live in the high-rise condo." "Really?" "Yes," I replied. Kevin, overwhelmed with excitement, suddenly grabbed my shoulders. "Calm down a bit." Sorry, he said, realizing how excited he was. And so it was decided that we would live in the high-rise condo. However, for me, it was the beginning of a nightmare. "I'll contact Dad then, okay," I said. "Thanks, but I can't believe I'm going to live in a high-rise condo." Kevin's eyes sparkled. After getting Kevin's approval, I called my dad the next day. "Hello, Dad," Kevin agreed, so we decided to move in. "That's great. It's already cleaned and ready for you anytime." "Got it. Thank you," I replied. Then I remembered something important and asked my father, "By the way, how will we handle the rent?" "Don't worry about that. As long as you live there, you won't need to pay rent." "Really?" "Of course, it's all for my dear daughter." My husband and I started preparing to move right away. We moved in just 1 week later. Perhaps we were both excited to live in the high-rise condo. "So this is a high-rise condo. It's incredible. I never imagined we could live in such a place," Kevin said. "It's like a dream, all thanks to your father." "Indeed, we need to express our gratitude," Kevin replied. Although we were initially confused by the larger space of the high-rise condo, it only took a week to get used to it. I had concerns about whether someone like me should live there, but those concerns faded away. About 2 months after we started living in the high-rise condo, Kevin said, "My sister Anna wants to come visit. Is that okay?" Kevin had an older sister named Anna. I heard from Kevin that she had been married but got divorced because she was fed up with her husband and had returned to her parents' home. That's fine, but why does she want to come here? I asked. I hadn't really talked much with her before, so I didn't quite understand why she wanted to visit. I mentioned our new place, and she said she wanted to come over. That's fine as long as it's on the weekend, I replied. I'll let her know then. When Saturday arrived, the doorbell rang, and I went to open it. Standing there was a woman dressed head to toe in designer clothes. I was so surprised that I stepped back. It's been a while. Do you remember me? She asked. Of course, Anna. Please, come in. My sister-in-law walked in and started looking around the house, inspecting every corner. She checked each room, nodding like she was satisfied with something. Is there something on your mind? I asked, curious. I was just admiring the house. Ordinary people can't live in such a place, right? It's all thanks to my father, I explained. We moved to the living room and started chatting casually. Then, out of nowhere, my sister-in-law made a snide remark. At the time, I didn't understand why she said that. It must be nice to be you, Sarah. Don't you think so, Kevin? I don't really think about it, Kevin replied. But this house is all thanks to your father-in-law, right? I felt uneasy and asked, did I do something wrong? Not at all. It's just that our family wasn't wealthy, she replied. Kevin had told me before that their father had passed away when they were in middle school, and since then they had faced many hardships. I started to think maybe she was jealous of me. That might be why she was wearing all those designer clothes. Well, I'll be going now. I'll visit again soon. Take care. For about 2 hours, the conversation mainly revolved around their hardships and how lucky I was. Kevin barely spoke during the whole time, just silently listening to his sister. I'm sorry my sister is like that, Kevin said afterward. I kind of figured, I replied. I'll make sure to warn her next time, Kevin promised, but less than a month later she visited us again, and this time she wasn't alone. Sorry for intruding, she said, barging in and plopping down on the sofa. Today I brought our mom along, but the door was locked. Oh, Kevin gave me a spare key, she said casually. What? I was shocked. I wanted to ask Kevin about it immediately, but he wasn't home. I had a bad feeling this was going to cause trouble. Then the most difficult person spoke up. It's not that big of a deal. What's the problem with having a spare key? The issue is that I wasn't informed about it, I replied. Maybe Kevin doesn't trust you, my mother-in-law said. I think so too, Anna chimed in. With both of them against me, I felt helpless. From that day on, my life became completely different. When I came home from work, I often found my sister-in-law and mother-in-law in the house. They would help themselves to the food in the fridge and move things around without asking. This isn't right, don't you think? I asked Kevin. Even if I say something, they won't listen. Maybe it's best to just let them do what they want, Kevin said. I can't stand living like this. Please talk to them. I was so frustrated with my husband for doing nothing and with myself for feeling powerless. Okay, I'll talk to them. Will you be there with me? Kevin asked. If you're going to speak up properly, then I don't mind, I replied. As usual, when my husband confronted them, they didn't pay any attention. Sarah must have put you up to this, right? Come on, Kevin, be more assertive, they said. That's right, you're the head of the household. You should have your own opinions, they added. My husband seemed to be thinking about something, looking down. Don't say weird things. Please leave, I finally told them. But then my husband unexpectedly turned against me. You're the one who should be quiet, he said. I was shocked. My husband was siding against me. He had completely given in to his mother and sister. They took advantage of Kevin's lack of confidence and his inability to say no. Now, I felt completely alone. I was wrong, my husband said with a new sense of confidence. What my sister and mother said is right. From now on, I'm going to express my own opinions. The two of them smirked and looked at us with satisfaction. From then on, things became one-sided. I've decided that my mom and sister can come and go as they please, my husband declared. Wait, you can't just make decisions like that without me, I protested. The decision is made, and you have no say in it, he replied, ignoring my concerns. His mother and sister backed him up. Sarah, that's enough, they said. Kevin is the head of this household. As his wife, you just need to follow him. There's a spare room, right? My mother-in-law asked. No way, I responded, but they continued. It's a waste to have an unused room, so we'll use it. The balance of power had clearly shifted in their favor. The room, which my father had allowed us to use, was now considered theirs. Given the situation, I had no choice but to tough it out. I decided to focus on my work and not worry about what was happening at home. 6 months later, my dedication to work paid off. You've been doing really well lately. How about taking on a higher position? My boss asked. Me? I've been watching your work, and I think you're the right person for the job. Thank you. I'll continue to do my best. It was unexpected but the happiest thing that had happened to me in a long time. However, there was a problem. You've been coming home late recently. What have you been up to? My husband asked suspiciously. Just work, really. Aren't you having an affair? If you don't believe me, go ahead and check, I replied. This was when my mother-in-law and sister-in-law would chime in. Getting so defensive makes you look even more suspicious, Anna said. Anna might be right, my mother-in-law added, but honestly, who would be interested in Sarah with her looks? They clapped their hands and laughed together, enjoying themselves at my expense. Before, they used to come over maybe 3 times a week, but now they were at our house almost every day. One day, my mother-in-law came up to me and said something completely unexpected. Do you even understand why you can live in a place like this? A woman like you doesn't belong here. I thought to myself, there she goes again. You can't even do household chores properly. You're useless here, do you get that? She continued. I wanted to snap back, but I knew that nothing I said would improve the situation, so I stayed silent. Eventually, my mother-in-law got bored and went back to her room. Just as I was about to start preparing dinner, my sister-in-law walked in. I heard the conversation earlier. There's never a moment of peace. You should really understand your place. You're like a maid in this house. I work hard too, you know, and I might sound bad, but I earn more than Kevin, I said. Then you should contribute that money to the household expenses for us, she shot back. I couldn't agree with her. I wasn't living in luxury. I was actually paying for most of our daily expenses like utilities and groceries. Kevin seemed to have forgotten that, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law didn't even know the reality. I often wondered what would happen if I stopped paying. Then why don't you work, Anna? I asked. Why should I have to do that? She replied, completely serious. I almost envied her ability to say such things. It was a mystery where she went every day without working. So where do you go every day? I asked. I don't need to tell you that, she said, avoiding eye contact. It was clear she was involved in something she couldn't openly talk about. Is that so? Then I'll just assume you're wandering around every day without working, I said seriously. Angered, my sister-in-law threw a mug from the table at me. It didn't hit me, but the mug shattered into pieces. Why did you dodge that? That was my favorite cup. Since it's your fault, clean it up, she demanded. I silently began cleaning up the broken pieces while she stood there watching and laughing. I thought about throwing the shards back at her, but I refrained. You're in the way standing there, she said. I'm just watching, she added as I cleaned up. After a few minutes, I tried to leave, but my sister-in-law stopped me again. Remember, if you say something weird next time, it'll be much worse. I understand. I'll be careful, I said, though I didn't mean it inside. As I watched my sister-in-law leave, I thought to myself, don't get too cocky, you'll get what's coming to you soon. Then one day, as usual, when I returned home from shopping, the house was in chaos. There were cardboard boxes everywhere and my mother-in-law was bustling around. What are you doing? I asked. This is going to be our home now. The rest of our stuff is arriving today, so please take care of it, she said. What? Why are you deciding this on your own? I asked, shocked. Oh, by the way, Anna will be coming too. Please welcome her. I immediately asked my husband, who had just returned from work, your mother and her family are saying they're going to live here. Oh yeah, that was today, wasn't it? What are you talking about? Huh? Didn't I mention it? They're moving in with us today, he said, laughing. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't think of what to say next. Don't just stand there. Get ready to make dinner. We're celebrating today, he added. At those words, my anger reached its peak. How can this be allowed? After all, we can live here thanks to me? Huh? What are you talking about? That's not true, he replied. Are you serious? You're just obeying everything your family says, I said. What did you say? Say that again, my husband said, raising his hand toward me. At that moment, it wasn't fear that I felt. I was shocked at how much my husband had changed, going from unassertive to someone who might hit me. But I wasn't scared, I was in disbelief. Go ahead, hit me if you dare, I said. He slowly lowered his arm, apparently intimidated, but then started laughing. What's so funny? I asked. I just remembered why we got married. You should be thankful you could marry me, he replied, laughing. What are you talking about? You might not know this, but I married you because nobody else was interested. I didn't marry you out of love. It's annoying, but I did it because you earn more than me. That's what Mom told me to do, he said. Anger boiled up inside me. So that was the reason, I thought. He continued, since you're married to someone like me, it's only natural for you to contribute to the living expenses. Ever since we got married, I had always been the one providing the money whenever needed. I never thought my husband was such a terrible person. That's mutual. You only bring home money. I never thought you could be so boring, he retorted. As we argued, my mother-in-law arrived. If you hate living together so much, why don't you just leave? She said. Why should I have to do that? I asked. We don't need someone like you in this place, she said. My sister-in-law agreed. Sarah is unnecessary. Nothing will change if you're gone. My mother-in-law then threw an envelope on the table. What is this? I asked. It's severance money from us. There's $10,000 in the envelope. Take it, get divorced, and leave. We'll take the house, she said, smirking. At that moment, I made up my mind. The high-rise condo we were living in was technically in my name, though I was only borrowing it for free from my father. I thought of a way to retaliate against them. Such foolish people, I thought. This is an opportunity for me. I decided to act immediately. Understood. I'll leave right away, I said. I thought you would put up more of a fight, my husband sneered. Well, that's the kind of woman she was. Too bad, but I don't want to see your face anymore, so leave quickly, my mother-in-law added. I quickly packed my bags and left the house, almost dancing with glee. I couldn't stop laughing as I imagined what would happen to my in-laws next. I decided to go back to my parents' house to inform my father about the situation. Why have you come back suddenly? My father asked. I've been kicked out of the house, I replied. Kicked out? How did that happen? He asked, concerned. I explained everything that had happened that day and the events leading up to it. My father's face turned red with anger as I spoke. After I finished, he was angrier than I had ever seen him. Let's kick them out immediately, he said, but I stopped him. Wait, Dad. I have a better idea, I said. What kind of idea? He asked. I shared the plan I had thought of when leaving the house. My father nodded in agreement. That's a brilliant idea, right? This way it benefits you as well, and I get my revenge. So you'll take care of it. Yes, don't worry, he assured me. The next day I contacted my husband about the apartment. I have no intention of giving it back, I told him. I know, but the ownership is still mine, so I'm thinking of transferring it to you. Then it will truly be yours, right? I see. I don't want to cause you any trouble. I'll handle the paperwork. Is that okay? Okay, I'll leave it to you, he agreed. All right, I'll also send the divorce papers by mail. Take care, I said, hanging up the phone. I could sense my husband's joy just before I hung up. A week later, the divorce was finalized and the paperwork for the high-rise condo was completed. All that was left was to wait. Hey, I got a bill for $6,000. What's the meaning of this? Explain. My furious ex-husband called me a month later. It was hard to suppress my laughter at his reaction. Well, it's a high-rise condo, you know. Did you think you could live there for free? But the rent was free until now, wasn't it? Indeed, when I was there, I laughed. This is no joke, he shouted so loudly that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It was free because I was there. But now that it's yours, you need to pay the rent. We're not going to pay that. You can choose not to, but remember, the owner of the apartment is my father, I reminded him. After a moment of silence, my mother-in-law took the phone. I heard from Kevin what you did. That was unnecessary of you. Unnecessary? I believe what I did was entirely justified. Please don't be mistaken, I responded. What an impudent woman you are, she said angrily. It doesn't matter to me. Haha. You shouldn't have given me $10,000 then, I provoked her. I thought I wouldn't have to deal with them anymore, but my words got to her. We will absolutely not pay, she said. Is that so? That's fine by me, but don't say I didn't warn you if my father decides to sue, I replied. My mother-in-law seemed shaken, losing her previous confidence. Aren't you ashamed to rely on your father? Not at all. It's more shameful for someone who tried to manipulate their son to their own ends, don't you think? I said. Realizing she was at a disadvantage, my mother-in-law abruptly hung up the phone. She was just running away. I immediately informed my father about the conversation. I see that I need to do something about it for my daughter, he said. I'm counting on you, I replied. My former in-laws acted impulsively, thinking only of their convenience, and this was the result. Such a pitiful family. They would face more difficulties from now on, and I would just wait and enjoy watching. Time passed, and my ex-husband and his family continued living in the high-rise condo without paying rent. Eventually, my father had to take action. I just billed them for the past due rent, he said. Really? We can't ignore this any longer. It will be a good lesson for them, I replied. Then a new revelation came to light. There were traces of unauthorized purchases made with a credit card in my name. A lawyer introduced by my father was hired, and preparations for a lawsuit began, demanding reimbursement from my ex-husband and his family. Why should we pay you? My sister-in-law objected, mostly because the purchases were expensive branded bags and clothes. How can you say that after shopping with someone else's money? This is clear theft, I said. It's pathetic to fuss over such trivial matters. Besides, those purchases were made before your divorce, so I think they're invalid, she argued. Unfortunately, that logic doesn't apply. You and I are strangers now, I said. I don't care about that, she replied, but then she hung up, escaping as usual. However, they couldn't escape this time and had to make the payment. They must pay the rent for the apartment, but that family doesn't have the means to pay. One person eventually came begging for forgiveness. What are you saying now? We can't afford to pay such an amount. We'd be ruined even if we took out loans. You understand, right? My mother-in-law was trying to get sympathy through tears. It's all your responsibility, aren't you ashamed? I asked, knowing she was fully aware of the situation. It's impossible. Please make sure to pay the full amount, I insisted. Afterward, it seems they continued to live in poverty. The three of them, having lost their place to live, returned to their old family home, which was in a dilapidated state due to neglect. Eventually, they realized they needed more money to live and decided to sell it for a cheap price. Sarah, please help me. I received a call from my ex-husband Kevin, but I ignored it and hung up. In the end, I was able to live in the high-rise condo they had left. Of course, I didn't have to pay any rent. My work was going well, and from now on, I would live my life putting my happiness first.
After my father suddenly passed away from an unexpected illness, leaving behind a staggering $2 million debt, my mother and brother Tom took matters into their own hands. They decided how to handle my father's inheritance without consulting me, leaving me to bear the brunt of the debt. My frustration with them reached a boiling point, but the thought of their future struggles made me smirk inwardly. I'm Nancy, a 24-year-old single woman working as a nursery teacher at a daycare. I graduated from a junior college and have always lived at home with my father, mother, and my brother Tom, who is close to my age. Since childhood, Tom and I haven't gotten along. A graduate of a prestigious university, Tom looked down on me for my junior college education. His arrogance was matched by his frequent mockery of my modest personality and average looks. With your plain appearance and lack of impressive credentials, who would ever want to date you? He would sneer. In reality, I do have a boyfriend, but I keep this a secret to avoid provoking Tom's scorn. Though Tom's sarcasm used to sting, those days are long behind me. I now take great pride in my work as a nursery teacher, finding immense joy in interacting with children and watching them grow. Tom's words no longer faze me. My mother, who reveres Tom for his prestigious university degree, constantly boasts about him to relatives and neighbors. In stark contrast, I was often treated as an afterthought. It was clear that my mother favored Tom and showered him with preferential treatment. Unlike her, my father always had my back. Whenever my mother gave snacks exclusively to Tom, my father would secretly share the same treats with me. He would proudly express his admiration for my choice to become a nursery teacher, and I deeply cherished his supportive gestures and words. My father was the CEO of a small company where Tom also worked. Unfortunately, the company's financial situation had been deteriorating recently. Despite my father's relentless efforts to cut the deficit and his late nights at the office, Tom remained indifferent. I can't work for a company run by someone who looks so evenly poor, Tom said, resigning from the company to take a position elsewhere. Since her marriage, my mother had stopped working and fully dedicated herself to managing the household. With no experience in supporting my father's business, she didn't grasp the challenges he faced. Despite witnessing his daily struggles, she criticized him for the company's lack of success. The company is still struggling. If you don't resolve the deficit soon, I won't be able to buy that new bag from the magazine. Honestly, what are you doing every day? You're completely useless, my mother said. She had an insatiable appetite for spending, especially on luxury items, often making impulsive purchases. Her dismissive attitude toward my father, as if she couldn't see the value of his hard work, filled me with outrage. Though I'm no business expert, I've witnessed my father's tireless efforts from a young age and understand how challenging it is to manage a business. My mother, who has been with him for years, should recognize this as well. I couldn't fathom why she would blame him as though he were incompetent. One day, my frustration boiled over, and I confronted my mother, demanding she stop belittling my father. Her response was dismissive and condescending. Why should I be scolded by someone like you? People without an education should keep their opinions to themselves. Don't speak on things you don't understand, she retorted. Tom, seemingly influenced by my mother's attitude, joined in and criticized me harshly. It was clear that despite sharing the same blood, our values and personalities were worlds apart. Nancy, don't let their words affect you. Education doesn't define your worth. Take pride in your role as a nursery teacher. That's what truly matters, my father said. His words of encouragement warmed my heart and bolstered my resolve. Even though part of me wanted to stand up to Tham and felt overshadowed by him, my father's support made me feel fearless. As long as he was by my side, I knew I could face anything. An unexpected event shattered my world. Father, I was horrified to learn that my father had collapsed at work. The company staff who reached out to me said he was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Without hesitation, I dashed to the hospital, only to find that my mother and brother were nowhere to be seen. I'm too busy to leave. You'll have to handle Dad's care, my mother said. I was stunned by her response. How could she claim to be too busy when my father's life was at stake? As a jobless person, surely she had more flexibility than I did. What could possibly be more important than being there for my father? In disbelief, I took care of the hospital formalities and listened to the doctor's grim news. My father had acute heart failure and only had a few days left. I visited him as often as I could, hoping to see his smile once more. A few days after his collapse, as if sensing my presence, he briefly regained consciousness while I held his hand. Dad, I'm so relieved to see you. Do you recognize me? Can you hear my voice? I pleaded desperately, but he looked at me with a distant, vacant stare before quietly closing his eyes, never to open them again. Until my father passed away, neither my mother nor Tham made any effort to visit him. They only appeared just before the funeral, clearly reluctant to oversee the arrangements. During our conversation there, it became apparent that my father's company had gone bankrupt, leaving behind a $2 million debt. Inheritances come with debts, my mother said, her tone dripping with disdain. As the funeral proceeded, both she and Tham began to blame my father for the situation. He was unreliable in life, and now he's left us with this burden. What a curse, they complained. What are we supposed to do about all this debt? My mother wondered aloud. I have a suggestion, Tham said with a smirk, turning his gaze toward me. Since Dad had such a soft spot for you, why don't you inherit everything? You can also take on the debt. It's only fair to repay the love you received from him. My mother added, her voice carrying a sense of cold expectation. Unbelievably, my mother and Tham were trying to offload both my father's inheritance and his debts onto me. Despite my father's passing, they were more concerned with their own interests than with mourning his loss. They had always belittled and ridiculed both my father and me, seeing us merely as tools for their gain. However, I had a plan in reserve, something my father had asked me to use if anything happened to him. It was time to put it into action. I decided to keep my true intentions hidden and reluctantly agreed to their demands, all while secretly preparing to execute my plan. Understood. I will take on the entire estate, including the debt. My easy acquiescence surprised both my mother and Tham, considering I was assuming a $2 million debt. They probably anticipated more resistance from me, but their satisfaction in offloading the burden onto me seemed to eclipse any surprise. They looked at me with a mix of triumph and condescension. So, you're actually going to pay off all the debt. We appreciate that. It's lucky for us, even if I don't quite understand your thinking. You really are quite naive, though. I suppose that's to be expected given your limited education, Tham said. My mother and Tham ultimately relinquished their claims to my father's estate. With no other relatives to contest the inheritance, I was the sole beneficiary. After my father's death, I moved out of the home I no longer wished to live in and began a new chapter on my own. It was then that I discreetly set my plan into motion. Several months after my father's passing, one day, what on earth is this? Tham, who I hadn't seen in a while, appeared visibly enraged, his face reddening as if he was on the verge of lashing out. His fury was likely triggered by seeing me emerge from a mansion that could only be described as extravagant. Why is Nancy, who supposedly inherited $2 million in debt and has such a low social status, living in a house like this? It was clear that this was the question Tham and my mother would be asking. Seeing your astonished faces is quite the reunion after so long. I'm glad to see you're doing well, I responded. Who do you think you are? Making jokes with no education. I want to know what's going on, Tham snapped. This is where I live. Is it really so surprising to see me coming out of my own home? Tham, growing increasingly agitated, advanced toward me. However, as a nursery teacher accustomed to lifting children daily, I had developed more strength than the average woman. Tham, who led a sedentary lifestyle and avoided exercise, was comparatively weak. I swiftly overpowered him and had him on the ground in no time. He looked utterly bewildered. As Tom lay on the ground and my mother rushed to his side, I smiled and began to explain. The reason I'm living here is because of the decision you both made to relinquish Dad's inheritance. Before he passed away, my father had been quietly building wealth through real estate to secure our future. Despite the company's debt, the market value of the properties increased significantly after I inherited the estate. I sold them at the right time, and even after accounting for inheritance taxes, the profit from the real estate exceeded $5 million. My father had anticipated this rise in value, which is why I took on the inheritance, despite the debt. Instead of using the proceeds to pay off the $2 million debt immediately, I first ensured that the employees of my father's company were fairly compensated. Additionally, I received a life insurance payout of $3 million. The amount was truly staggering. Wait a minute, life insurance is usually paid out to the spouse, right? My mother interjected. It appears Dad changed the beneficiary to me, I explained. He had informed me of this while he was still alive. My father was deeply troubled by your harsh words and excessive spending. To ensure that his life insurance money was used wisely, he trusted me to manage it and change the beneficiary. I have a dream that I've kept to myself, one to support and nurture children facing economic hardships. With the funds from my father's estate and the life insurance payout, I built a large house that could easily be called a mansion. While continuing my work as a nursery teacher, I am also applying the real estate investment skills I learned from my father to steadily grow my assets. After explaining everything, my mother and Tom were enraged, their voices rising in anger. This is absurd. Why didn't you tell us something so crucial? If we had known about the real estate, we never would have let you inherit it. I responded firmly. Dad anticipated that you would react exactly like this if he knew. That's why he kept it a secret, to prevent you from claiming everything. I didn't expect you to respond just as he predicted, but it seems he was right. What are you talking about? Regardless, we deserve our share of the inheritance. We have a right to it. I was taken aback by my mother's audacious demand for a portion of the assets. It was clear that when it came to money, people reveal their true nature. My mother and Tom were showing their cowardice and arrogance, just as I had always known them to be. You both forfeited that right when you renounced the inheritance. It's not possible to reclaim it now. I cannot hand over the hard-earned assets my father accumulated to people who are consumed by their own greed. The ignorant, uneducated one just won't stop whining. Quit your nagging and hand it over now, Tom shouted. Despite their continued baseless complaints, I had no choice but to call security to have them removed. They left quietly after being escorted out. In the following days, security footage showed them loitering near my house, trying to find a way to claim my father's inheritance. Their persistence was unsettling. Using the footage, I reported them to the police as suspicious individuals. After that, I no longer saw my mother or Tom around my home. After some time had passed, I learned about my mother and Tom's situation from a family friend who had been close to us for years. Tom had found a new job, but his self-centered attitude quickly earned him a poor reputation. Within less than a year, he had alienated his boss and was relegated to menial desk work, a far cry from the special treatment he had enjoyed as the president's son at my father's company. Eventually, the harsh work environment took its toll, and he left the job. His tarnished reputation made it challenging for him to find new employment within the industry. Why aren't you working? Stop lazing around, my mother would admonish. It's not like I'm just sitting around doing nothing, Tom would retort. What kind of effort are you putting in, you useless, unemployed person? My mother would criticize. After witnessing Tom's failure, her attitude toward him changed drastically. Once doting on him, she now blamed him for his incompetence and joblessness, growing increasingly cold and distant. The shift in my mother's behavior placed immense psychological pressure on Tom, eventually leading him to become a recluse. Having relied on my father's income for years and never having developed the skills or inclination to work, my mother now faces financial struggles alongside Tom. Both are struggling to make ends meet. As for me, I am happily married to the man I have been dating, and we now live in the large house I own. My husband shares my passion for helping children in economic need. Together, we are working towards this dream by setting up the necessary facilities and obtaining the required qualifications. I hold deep gratitude for my irreplaceable father, and with my husband by my side, I am living a fulfilling and purposeful life.
My name is Alice, and I'm a 33-year-old sales executive at an e-commerce company in Winona. I have a happy family with my husband Scott, our son Oliver, and my mother-in-law Ruth. I had a happy childhood in Philadelphia, but I got married young at 18 while still in college studying business management. My parents, who loved me very much, were worried about me getting married so early, but I was too in love to think about the consequences. My boyfriend seemed perfect, and we rented a place to live. We worked multiple odd jobs to make ends meet since our families cut us off. We had our first child when I was 19. At first, everything was going well, and we managed our parenting duties just fine, but after Oliver was born, things changed. My husband's father died in a car accident, and his mother had a mental breakdown from the shock, later being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Not being allowed to see his parents deeply affected my husband. I supported him, but he eventually quit his job and started gambling and became abusive. I left him when he hit our 5-year-old son. I started over, got my current job, and decided to take a break from relationships to focus on myself and my son. After a year, my best friend invited me to dinner with her and her fiancé. At the restaurant, a handsome man with warm hazel eyes asked if he could sit next to me. It was Scott. We met again at my friend's wedding but barely spoke. At the end of the evening, Scott told me I looked stunning in my gown. We went for a walk, talked about our careers, hobbies, and families, and eventually started dating and got married. Scott has been a loving father to Oliver, who considers him his real dad. Every year on Oliver's birthday, we visit a new city. Even my mother-in-law Ruth loved Oliver, but things changed when I got pregnant. One day at Walmart, I'd overheard Ruth telling the cashier to check the fruits carefully because her pregnant daughter-in-law, me, shouldn't get sick. When the cashier congratulated her on her first grandchild, Ruth replied, "It will be my first real grandchild. I have a step-grandson who's 10 because my son married my daughter-in-law when he was 5, but I tried to treat him the same." I realized then that Ruth never truly loved my child with all her heart. Ruth also has a granddaughter from her daughter, whom she adores and spoils with gifts. She spends a lot of time with her granddaughter, and anyone who sees them would think Ruth is the best grandmother ever, but only for her daughter's child. One morning, I woke up to the sound of Scott arguing with his mother. Ruth was furious that Scott didn't want to have another biological child. Scott and I had discussed this the night before, and I advised him not to go through with it. Ruth was angry and threatened to end her life if we didn't have another child. Scott assured her we wouldn't make that decision, but she thought I had influenced him. I didn't want a strained relationship with Ruth. She had been kind before, and I didn't know what had caused the change, but I hoped we could win her over with love. I didn't realize that was a big mistake. We were at a farmhouse for Ruth's birthday, and she had already eaten 2 apples but wanted more. Scott refused, and Oliver playfully whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, Grandma." Oliver whispered to his grandma, "I'll sneak an apple for you upstairs." Scott noticed and asked, "What's going on over there?" But my mother-in-law wasn't amused. She said in a stern voice, "Oliver, it's not good to sneak food because of choking. You should never take food without asking an adult." I stepped in and said, "You're right, but he knows it's not okay. He was just joking with you." We laughed, and I added, "Yes, I'm her apple dealer," but she replied sharply, "That's even worse. He shouldn't learn to play favorites." I was heartbroken when I saw Oliver's sad face. He was just trying to bond with his grandmother, who once loved him so much. Scott couldn't take it and said, "Mom, you know how much he loves you, right? He would never do anything to hurt you." She responded, "Yeah, I'm sure you love him very much." One day, I was cuddling with Oliver when she saw us and exclaimed, "Alice, what are you doing? You're pregnant, and you're crushing your belly. It's not good for the baby. Don't do that before your delivery." I wondered if that was really true but decided to stay quiet to avoid any drama. Things got worse on Oliver's 12th birthday. Scott wanted to throw a big party, and we invited many relatives, colleagues, family friends, and all of Oliver's friends. As we were about to cut the cake, my sister-in-law's daughter came crying to my mother-in-law, who was standing next to me. She claimed that Oliver had hit her and pushed her to the ground. My mother-in-law's anger flared up. I could see she was losing control. Before I could calm her down, she went up to Oliver and slapped him without asking what happened. "You've got a lot of nerve, causing trouble on your birthday. Get out of the house," she yelled. Oliver flinched from the slap and ran out of the house crying, I followed him. After some time, I came back and shouted at her, "What are you doing? It's his birthday. At least hear what he has to say." She snapped back, "Stop siding with your son. I've tolerated him enough. He's forgotten where he comes from." Scott, trying to defend Oliver, said, "Mom, do you even know what the fight was about? They argued about you." She told Oliver he's not her real grandson and mocked him until he pushed her. My mother-in-law glared at me. I said, "I don't condone his behavior, but I wonder where she learned this from." My mother-in-law was speechless for a moment, and that's when we finally discovered why she treated her grandchildren differently. She said, "It's normal for me not to feel the same affection for him because he wasn't born for my son. The children of my biological children will always be dearer to me than your son. I'm going to love your baby more. That's just how most grandmothers feel, even if they don't say it." I couldn't believe my ears. It felt like a shocking revelation, leaving us all stunned. I couldn't understand where she got this old-fashioned idea. Who influenced her to think this way? Her reasoning left us speechless. Oliver later told me that his grandma used to tell his sister that his brother or sister would be mommy and daddy's real child. I asked him what else grandma had said, and he told me she kept reminding him that his sister wasn't really his sister. I noticed my mother-in-law looked away with a hint of guilt. Now Oliver believes he's extra special to us because we don't want him to feel less important, even though his younger sibling is going to be grandma's favorite grandchild. I confronted her. "What have you been telling him?" She replied, "I didn't lie. It's the truth, and he needs to realize it." Unfortunately, Scott was away on a business trip when all this happened. The next day, I told him everything. He said, "I'm not surprised at all. She's always been cold towards him, sometimes acting like he doesn't exist." I remember she wouldn't even wish him a simple happy birthday, let alone give him gifts. She never shows any interest in his life, never asks how he's doing in school or about his friends. Scott then tried talking to her. "Mom, what you've done is too much. I've accepted Oliver and am raising him as my own, so what difference does it make?" She replied, "It makes a lot of difference, Scott, and it matters to me. Don't you dare judge me. You can't force me to love your son. That's never going to happen. I don't feel like he's my grandchild, and you'll have to get over it." But Scott was firm. "No, Mom, it's you will have to get over not seeing us anymore. We don't need this kind of negativity in our lives, and we definitely don't want our child to experience it. I want you to leave my house right now." Shock and betrayal crossed her face as she stared at her son. Even though I didn't want Scott to live apart from his mother or push her away, I thought it was for the best. We didn't need her in our lives. Being a grandmother to a child who loved her so much was a privilege, and she threw it away by her own choice. Too bad for her. As much as it upset us, we had to make this decision, but she didn't give up. "That's not fair. You can't leave your elderly mother on the streets. I can sue you." Scott replied, "Do whatever you want. You won't see your grandkids anymore. You'll be a bad influence on them." After she said that, I quietly hoped that when she gets older, she wouldn't come crawling back to us for help because our doors would be closed. If that's how you truly feel about me and my son, then you shouldn't be part of my children's lives. I'll make sure you can't poison their minds anymore. Scott packed her things and she went to stay in Florida. Meanwhile, she kept threatening us over the phone, claiming her rights over the house and her grandchildren. She even bad-mouthed me to relatives, blaming me for separating her from her son. Blinded by rage, Scott and I blocked her on everything after sending a text detailing her actions, which we heard from Oliver and his sister. We made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable and that she wouldn't see her grandkids until they were much older and could understand the world better, so they wouldn't be swayed by her words. We didn't hear from her for a long time after that. One day we got an anonymous call saying my mother-in-law was admitted to the hospital after breaking her pelvis in the bathroom. There was a chance she might never walk again. Scott panicked when he heard this and rushed to be by her side. No matter how good a father Scott was, he was also her son. Though he was angry at his mother for what she did, he couldn't hide the fact that he loved her. "Honey, I think stopping her from seeing the kids is inhumane now. She's old and weak and would want to be with her family in these difficult times. She's just a bit traditional," Scott said, getting emotional. "I met her in the hospital, and she told me that being alone in a hospital bed made her realize how unpredictable life is. She admitted she didn't expect karma to hit her this way." Scott then held my hand and said, "I think we should bring her back home. I don't have the heart to leave her alone at this time, and I can't keep going back and forth to Florida. I hope you understand. I replied, "Of course, honey. It pains me to see her like this. No matter what, she is your mother, and you should be there for her right now. It might be difficult with Oliver, but I'll make sure they get along. I believe she's realized she was wrong." A few days later, she was discharged from the hospital, and we brought her home. Things seemed to be going smoothly, and I thought we were finally back together as a happy family. One day, Oliver was playing around the house when he accidentally slipped and hurt his elbow. A few days later, we were unexpectedly visited by officials from the Social Services Department. They said they had received a complaint that my husband and I were neglecting Oliver because we were excitedly awaiting the arrival of our new baby. They even claimed that the injury on Oliver's elbow was a sign of physical abuse. The officials tried to take Oliver away from us. I was terrified and did everything I could to convince them that the complaint was false, but they wouldn't listen. They took my baby away. I was inconsolable. Scott said, "I wonder who might have given them this false information." My mother-in-law suggested we visit the office and personally convince them to let us keep Oliver. After a lot of effort, we finally got him back and proved that the complaint was malicious. But as we prepared to leave, Oliver softly mumbled to me, "Don't leave me with Dad, Mama. I'm scared of him." This shocked me since Oliver had never said anything like that before. Scott was also surprised and tried to hug Oliver, but he pulled away. One day, when I found Oliver alone, I asked him about it. "Oliver loves his mama, doesn't he?" I asked. "Yes, Mama," he replied. "And he never lies to me, so will he answer honestly?" He nodded. "Why are you scared of Daddy, honey? Did he say something?" "No. But Grandma said that once the baby is here, Daddy will throw me out of the house." I was devastated. We had given her another chance to be part of a happy family, and she had ruined it. I realized she could never truly accept us. I also had a strong suspicion about who might have contacted social services with the false complaint, but I decided to talk to Scott first instead of confronting her. However, fate intervened. Ever since her accident, my mother-in-law had been using a wheelchair. That evening, she was preparing coffee when she accidentally spilled hot water on her leg. She screamed, "Help me, Mother of God," and to my surprise, sprang from her wheelchair and rushed to the kitchen to get some ice. Coincidentally, Scott had just returned from work. We both witnessed her walking, revealing that she had been faking her injury to get back into our home. "Mom, you can walk?" Scott asked, shocked. She froze and slowly turned around. Oh, the impact of the hot water must have helped me walk again. What a miracle. But Scott wasn't convinced. "This is sick, Mom. How could you stoop so low? I idolized you as a child, and this is how you repay me? Just because you despise a little child so much." I had never seen Scott so angry and hurt. "I trusted you and wanted to take care of you after what happened, but this is how you pay me back. Get out of my house now. Please, hear me out," she pleaded. "I did this because I want you to realize we can be a happy family without that child. Your child needs a grandparent. Don't deprive her of that happiness. What will you say when she grows up and finds out she has a grandmother you chose to hide from her?" Scott replied, "I'll take care of that. I'm sure when our child is old enough to understand, they'll see that you being around could do no good." He went to pack her belongings and returned with her luggage. You can't be a good mother if you can convince yourself to do and say such horrible things to a young child, even going so far as to brainwash him. We never saw her again after that. A few months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Scott loved both of his children equally and taught them to always stand by the truth. I often reflected on how I had seen mothers. My mother was a modern, progressive woman despite being from the countryside. She rarely talked about marriage and kids, always pushing me to fulfill my career goals. Unfortunately, I didn't value her ideas back then because I wanted to get married so badly. But life eventually shows you the truth. I learned from my mistakes and from the people I met. Scott and his mother were from the same family but different generations. While I couldn't entirely blame her for her outdated beliefs, I think that if she truly loved Scott, she would have found happiness in his happiness. Her comments and behavior towards my son were unreasonable and unfair. Luckily, Oliver didn't grow up to hate or disrespect her, but he always remembered her as his grandmother. I couldn't imagine what would have happened if she had stayed with us longer and continued her manipulative ways. Fortunately, fate intervened, and we were freed from her toxicity and drama once and for all. Hey there, I'm Valentina, and I've been thinking a lot about life lately. I'm big on being independent, thanks to my amazing dad who raised me that way. But things got a bit complicated recently when I had some issues with my not-so-friendly mother-in-law. Let me tell you how my husband Alan and I met. We were interns at the same marketing job when I was 24. We became good friends, and as you can guess, spending more time together made us fall deeply in love. So when we found out we were expecting a baby last year, we couldn't resist getting married. Some might think it was just because of the baby, but we genuinely wanted to make it official. It was a special moment, and the only person who knew beforehand was my best friend, Kara. When we told our parents, the reactions were different. My family isn't your typical Hispanic family. My father started with very little but built a successful company despite facing challenges as a person of color. He always encouraged my mom and me to break stereotypes and chase our dreams. Because of our unique background, my parents were totally fine with us eloping and getting married. They were genuinely happy for us, and when we shared the baby news, they were overjoyed. However, Alan's parents didn't seem as thrilled. They weren't as engaged or excited about our marriage like my parents were. A week after we shared the news, my parents came over to our apartment for dinner, bringing their blessings and excitement. We invited Alan's parents too, but they didn't show up. Fast forward to my second trimester, and Alan's parents finally decided to visit us while they were in town for a friend's wedding. We all had dinner together at our place, but it was awkward. I was really looking forward to getting to know them better since we're family now, right? During dinner, Alan's dad kept asking questions about my dad's company, which made me uncomfortable. Alan's mom, Elaine, seemed especially focused on me, and it was clear she wasn't on my side. She made sarcastic comments that made me realize winning her over wouldn't be easy. But I knew I had to try for Alan's sake, because family means everything to him. The dinner was a disaster, and Elaine made it clear she wasn't happy. But I did my best for Alan, even though it was tough. Life went on, and Alan stayed busy with his marketing job, but dealing with his parents, especially Elaine, wasn't easy. While I was taking time off due to my pregnancy, we were about midway through the third trimester when my best friend Kara suggested it was time for a baby shower. We loved the idea. Being someone who loves to go all out, I wanted it to be the most amazing baby shower ever. We decided to invite all our friends and, of course, both of our families who hadn't met each other yet. It seemed like the perfect chance to bring everyone together. Kara, who's great at event planning, found us a beautiful, spacious botanical garden venue since our apartment couldn't fit so many people. About a week before the big day, we sent out invitations to all our friends and family, and both of our families confirmed they'd be there to celebrate with us. Both sets of parents arrived in town the day before the baby shower, and I had an idea. I suggested that we take them out to dinner to get to know each other in a more private setting before the big event. I thought it would be a great way to help everyone feel more comfortable before the baby shower. But little did I know, this plan would completely dampen my mood for the upcoming celebration. We made dinner reservations, and my mom was the first to arrive. I'd asked her where Dad was, and she said he got caught up with something important. As we were catching up at the table, Alan's parents joined us. My mother-in-law greeted my mom with a cold smile, and you could feel the tension in the air. Then my mom got up and shook hands with my father-in-law. "It's nice to meet you, Mariana." "Ah, nice to meet you. Oh, we once hired a maid for our house who had the same last name as you," my mother-in-law said. We all just looked at each other, thinking, did she really just say that? "Oh, really? That's an interesting coincidence. Anyway, let's order some drinks," my mom replied, trying to move on. "That's a great idea. Also, why isn't your dad here, Valentina?" Elaine asked, and just like that, her comment got swept under the rug. To be honest, I was fuming inside. How could she make such a thoughtless comment to my mom? It really got under my skin. I couldn't understand why Elaine would say something so hurtful and insulting, not just to me, but especially to my family. I tried to put myself in Elaine's shoes, wondering if maybe she had some reservations about me because Alan and I eloped without informing her. Maybe that was why she wasn't accepting of our relationship. But even then, that didn't excuse her rude behavior toward my mom. I felt terrible for my mom. I couldn't believe she had to sit through dinner with that hurtful comment hanging over her. It's one thing if Elaine didn't like me, but my mom didn't deserve any of that negativity. I tried my best to shift my focus away from the awkward encounter. The rest of the dinner was just small talk between the parents while Alan and I continued to chat about the baby and our excitement for the future. After dinner, when it was time for our parents to leave, I walked my mom out. While Alan was seeing his parents off, I felt the need to apologize to my mom for Elaine's behavior. "Mom, I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry about what Elaine said. She hasn't exactly warmed up to me yet, but I'm hoping she'll come around eventually. It's okay, Maija. You're a wonderful girl, and I know you'll win her over in time. Your dad and I will see you tomorrow. Get home safe. Bye, Valentina." "Bye, love you. Tell Dad his presence was missed." The car ride home was just as awkward as the dinner. I was really hoping Alan would say something about his mom's behavior or at least explain it, but he didn't bring it up, and I was surprised. I decided not to confront him at that moment because I didn't want to ruin the baby shower. I figured I'd talk to him about it after the event, hoping we could sort things out then. So we got home, tried to sleep off the tension, and woke up to the big day, the baby shower. We reached the venue around noon, and Kara was already there, busy setting everything up with the workers. She was doing an amazing job, and the place looked incredible with balloons, confetti, flowers, decorations, glitter, and sparkles everywhere. Guests started arriving at 2, and Alan and I were on hosting duty, trying to make everyone feel welcome. But just as my parents showed up, Alan's parents walked in too, and I wasn't sure how to feel after the drama from the night before. I was still upset with Alan, but I kept my cool for the moment. Then, to my surprise, Elaine decided to break the ice. "Hello, Mariana. Hello, Manuel. Hey, it's nice to see you again. You know, I've been thinking about what happened yesterday, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry for my behavior. It was totally uncalled for. No worries, it's nothing we can't move past. Let's just move forward and enjoy today, okay? This is my husband, Manuel. Manuel, meet Elaine. It's nice to finally meet you in person, Manuel," Elaine said. "Likewise, Elaine. And oh, Mr. Herrera, this is my husband, William. Actually, William knows all about your company. Back in the day, you were quite the talk when you were up and coming. Nice, I know your husband too." "The world is so small," my dad responded. "Ah, what? You know my husband, William? Have you guys met before?" Elaine asked, surprised. What just happened? It turns out that not only was Elaine caught off guard, but all of us were totally shocked to find out that William and my dad already knew each other. "You've got to be kidding, right? How do you know him?" I asked. "Well, he works with me." "Wait, hold on, none of us knew this. Dad, you have some explaining to do. Fill us in, please." "He manages my $50 million portfolio," my dad admitted. "What about that job with Christopher? Weren't you managing for him, William?" Elaine questioned. "Couldn't we just talk about this when we get home?" William replied. "Dad, why didn't you tell us about this before? You've been keeping this a secret from us?" I asked, still trying to understand what was going on. "Yeah, how did this even start?" Alan added. "It's not like that. It just never came up. Let's not make a big deal of it, okay? You have guests waiting," my dad said, trying to move on. Wow, what a whirlwind of a day it had been. The revelation that William and my dad knew each other took us all by surprise, and it just got swept under the rug during the baby shower. But honestly, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My father-in-law had been working for my dad. Why didn't William mention it last night when Alan brought up my dad at dinner? And did my dad already know him before hiring him? So many questions were swirling in my head. Despite the lingering mystery, the baby shower went well, but that topic was like an elephant in the room. Alan and I could no longer ignore it. He even told me that we needed to talk about it because he had no idea either. After the party wrapped up and we got home, we both decided to make those calls, individually of course. Alan called his dad and I called mine. We retreated to separate rooms and made our respective calls to our family members. We agreed that after talking, we'd compare notes and figure out the truth. "Hey, Dad. Maija, you should be resting. Today was a long day and the baby's due soon." "I know, Dad, but I just wanted to talk to you about something first. How long has my father-in-law been working for you?" "For about a month now. I didn't realize he was your father-in-law when I hired him. It was just a coincidence. I mean, how could I possibly know? He had just been fired by his management team, and I gave the poor guy a chance. He knew all about you, though. A couple of months ago, when I met him and Elaine for the first time, he couldn't stop praising you and your company. It's just strange that he never mentioned me to you, don't you think? I asked, still puzzled. You know, people have their own ways of doing things, and sometimes they keep certain things to themselves. Maybe he had his reasons, my dad replied, trying to ease my concerns. I guess so, but it's still a bit odd. Get some rest and take care of yourself, Maija. Don't let this stuff keep you up at night. Good night. Okay, good night, Dad. I finished my call with my dad and was making my way to Alan's room to fill him in when I overheard him on the phone. He sounded pretty upset, so I tried to eavesdrop. Okay, Mom, what if Dad works for Valentina's dad? You're so obsessed with what people think, and you don't have to act superior all the time. Maybe that's why Dad kept this from you. He knew you'd make his life hell if you found out. I tried to let go of that Mariana incident, but you really went overboard, Mom. Insulting people won't make you better than them. I love Valentina, and I won't defend you again on this. Just get over it and accept her. Maybe apologize to her. Yeah, okay, bye. Once Alan was done, I played it cool, pretending I didn't hear a thing. We exchanged stories about our conversations with our respective parents, and I was completely honest, as was Alan. He addressed his dad's job situation. His dad had been in a tough spot, going through a rough patch after getting fired. William lucked out and got selected for my dad's job that he had posted about. He didn't mention it to Elaine and the rest of the family, knowing she'd flip out. She wouldn't want William working for Manuel because she wouldn't want her family to be in any way dependent on her son's wife's family. Her ego got in the way. I have to say that I admire Alan's dedication to making things work between us and his mom. He meant the world to me and wanted her to rethink her stance and apologize for her problematic comments. Despite her past antics, I was willing to give her another shot for Alan's sake. He said she just needed some time. A whole month passed, and the baby was ready to make her grand entrance. Luckily, Alan was there when my water broke, and he rushed me to the hospital. We were blessed with a little girl, and we named her Catalina. She was just the cutest when I first saw her. Once we got home, our friends couldn't wait to meet our little baby girl. My parents caught a flight the very next day. Kara was all pumped up because now she had a niece to play dress-up with. Alan reached out to his mom and shared the news of our daughter's arrival. Even after weeks of not speaking to her, she didn't visit us for a whole week. But then, out of the blue, she called Alan and asked if she could make arrangements for my parents to visit so she could apologize and start anew with our family. I called my folks and asked if they could drop by for a day, and they were totally up for it. We were over the moon, feeling super strong as a couple and soaking up all the happiness. The big day finally arrived, and Alan and I prepared some mouth-watering dishes to celebrate with everyone. Catalina was the star of the show, bringing our families together. Soon enough, everyone had gathered. My mom surprised me with the sweetest gift, a matching baby blanket and a pastel pink mummy scarf made out of soft wool that she had knitted herself. It was so thoughtful, and I cherished it dearly, keeping it safe in my room. As we all settled in, Alan's dad took the lead and apologized for not informing my dad earlier that he was my father-in-law. It was a good step to break the ice, and from there, everyone started mingling and getting along. My mom and Elaine even cleared the air, and it seemed like they were bonding over how adorable Catalina was and how she had gotten my eyes and Alan's nose. But in the middle of it all, I noticed Elaine was missing. I went to look for her and found her in my room. Elaine was soaking the scarf my mom made in her glass of fine wine, and to make matters worse, she poured the remaining wine all over the blanket. I could not believe the audacity of this woman. Without thinking, I snatched the wet scarf from Elaine's hands and stormed back into the living room where everyone was seated. All eyes were on me, and Elaine followed me out. Okay, that's it, Elaine. You've been driving me nuts since day one, insulting my parents, acting all high and mighty, and now ruining this sweet gift from my mom. You've been nothing but bitter, and you've treated me like trash. What the hell, Mom? What did you do now? Alan interjected. She ruined the present my mom got us. How immature is this? Why are you doing this? Being this petty isn't making you look good, you know. I've given you way too many chances. I've seriously given it so many tries to let go of the past and move on, but it's like you're stuck in your ways, huh? I've been putting in the effort to build a connection with you because I genuinely care about your son. I've put up with all the nonsense, but it's like you're not even willing to hear me out. You're just so set on trying to hurt me. I think it would be better if you just left and stayed away from my family. Alan, please, honey. You're my child, and yet you're the one who's acting like a child. We've tried to give you a chance to make things right, but you keep pushing it. I won't tolerate this behavior anymore. Dad, can you take Mom home? Elaine, maybe it's best if we go home now, William chimed in. Let me tell you, it was like a drama straight out of a reality show. When Alan put his foot down and asked his mom to leave, the whole room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Elaine's face turned white as a ghost, and she started bawling like a baby. It was like a soap opera unfolding right before our eyes. I have to admit, seeing the look on Elaine's face after her son asked her to leave was pretty satisfying. As she walked out with tears in her eyes, I couldn't help but feel a little vindicated, and it felt pretty darn good. I always believe in treating people with kindness and respect, but sometimes some folks just need to learn their lesson the hard way. Alan was very apologetic to my parents, and honestly, they deserved it. Even my dad told me that the next day my father-in-law reached out to him at work and apologized for his wife's behavior. But hey, we're done with all that nonsense now. We've cut off Elaine from our lives, and good riddance, I say. Ain't nobody got time for that negativity when we've got our adorable little Catalina in the picture. Alan was a bit down about his mom, but he's doing what's best for our little family, and honestly, she's been trying to reach out through William, but it's all just a show. I ain't falling for that act again. What goes around comes around, folks.
The glossy magazine cover stared back at me from the newsstand. Text Rising Star. How David Chen built Quantum Leap from nothing. Nothing. I almost laughed. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't made me so angry. My name is Alex Torres, and 2 years ago, I watched my best friend steal my life's work and turn it into a $50 million company. But I'm getting ahead of myself. David and I met in college, 2 computer science majors with big dreams. While other students partied, we spent countless nights in the computer lab, fueled by energy drinks and ambition. We shared everything. Ideas, codes, dreams of changing the world through technology. The idea that would become Quantum Leap started in our senior year. I'd been working on an algorithm that could revolutionize how artificial intelligence processed natural language. It wasn't just another chatbot. This was something different, something that could understand context and nuance in a way no other eye had managed. This is incredible, David said one night, watching me debug another section of code. The applications for this could be huge. I nodded, too focused on my screen to notice the calculating look in his eyes. I think this could change everything. Customer service, education, maybe even healthcare. After graduation, David landed a job at a prestigious tech firm while I took an internship at a smaller startup. We stayed close, meeting every weekend to work on what we still called our project. I shared all my progress, every breakthrough, every setback. David always listened intently, offering encouragement and suggestions. What I didn't know was that he was taking notes. Detailed notes. The first sign something was wrong came when David started missing our weekend meetings. Work's crazy, he texted. Rain check. I didn't think much of it at the time. We were both building our careers after all. Then came the day I saw the announcement in TechCrunch. Former Google engineer launches revolutionary AI platform. The headline didn't worry me until I saw David's face smiling up from the article. My hands shook as I read the description of Quantum Leap's proprietary technology. It was my algorithm, my code, my dream. I called David immediately, straight to voicemail. I texted, emailed, even went to his apartment. Nothing. Finally, a week later, he agreed to meet me at our old coffee shop. Look, he said, stirring his untouched latte. I know you're upset, but you have to understand. This is business. The core idea might have started with you, but I'm the one who made it viable. I'm the one who built it into something real. Something real? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. David, that's my algorithm. My code. We worked on this together. He shook his head, his expression maddeningly calm. No, Alex. You worked on a school project. I built a company. There's a difference. I trusted you, I said, my voice cracking. You were my best friend. And you were an intern with some interesting ideas, he replied, standing up. That's all. Don't make this into something it's not. As he walked away, leaving his cold coffee behind, something inside me hardened. David thought he had won, thought he could simply take what was mine and rewrite history. But he'd forgotten something crucial about me. I never deleted anything. Every email we'd exchanged about the project, every piece of code I'd written, every meeting we'd had in the lab, it was all documented. I'd even recorded our brainstorming sessions, a habit I'd developed to help me remember important details. That night, I pulled out my external hard drive and started organizing everything. Emails dating back to our junior year, discussing the initial concept. Video recordings of us working through problems together. My voice clearly explaining the core algorithms that now powered Quantum Leap. Git commits showing the evolution of the code, time-stamped and authenticated. I had proof. Real, solid proof that David hadn't built anything from nothing. He'd built it from my work, my ideas, my dedication. But proof wasn't enough. I needed a plan. I contacted Maya Patel, a lawyer specializing in intellectual property law. She reviewed my evidence with increasing interest. This is quite compelling, she said, spreading the documents across her desk. The timestamps, the continuous development history. It shows a clear progression from your original work to their current product. So we can stop them? I asked, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. She hesitated. It's not that simple. They have resources, a legal team. This could get expensive and ugly very quickly. I don't care about expensive, I said firmly. I care about the truth. Maya studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, but if we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. They'll try to paint you as a disgruntled ex-friend trying to cash in on their success. We need to control the narrative. Over the next few weeks, we built our case methodically. Maya helped me organize my evidence into a clear, undeniable timeline showing the evolution of my work and its subsequent theft by David. Meanwhile, Quantum Leap was everywhere. David appeared on tech podcasts, gave interviews about his innovative approach to AI development. Each appearance, each quote about building everything from scratch made my blood boil. Then came the interview that changed everything. David was featured in a major tech magazine discussing Quantum Leap's meteoric rise. The interviewer asked about rumors that the core technology had been developed by someone else. David laughed, that same dismissive laugh I'd heard in the coffee shop. I know who you're talking about, Alex Torres. He was an intern at a startup where I used to mentor. Rock Coffee sat in on some meetings. Now he's trying to claim he invented everything. It's sad, really. Some people just can't handle seeing others succeed. I stared at the words until they blurred. Coffee, meetings, intern. He was erasing me, reducing years of work and friendship to nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my computer, surrounded by evidence of my contribution. Our contribution to what became Quantum Leap. Then I had an idea. I started coding. Not AI this time, but a simple website. I uploaded every piece of evidence I had, emails, videos, code commits, all organized chronologically. Each item was time-stamped, verifiable, undeniable. Then I wrote a blog post. Not angry, not accusatory, just facts. I described the development of the algorithm, our collaboration, the moment I discovered the theft. Everything documented, everything proven. Maya called me as soon as she saw it. Alex, this is risky. They could sue you for defamation. Let them, I replied. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, right? And everything on that site is true. The website went live at midnight. By morning, it had gone viral in the tech community. Developers, engineers, and industry insiders were picking apart the evidence, verifying timestamps, analyzing code similarities. #Quantum Theft started trending on Twitter. David's PR team scrambled to contain the damage, releasing statements about misunderstandings and parallel development. But the evidence was too clear, too detailed to dismiss. Then came the email from Lisa Chen, David's sister and Quantum Leap's CFO. We need to talk, she wrote, not through lawyers. Just us. I stared at her message for a long time, remembering all the dinners I'd shared with their family, all the times Lisa had teased us about being married to our computers. What do you think? I asked Maya. She frowned at her screen. Legally, I'd advise against any unofficial communication. But sometimes resolving things person to person is better than letting lawyers fight it out. I agreed to meet Lisa at a quiet restaurant away from the tech corridor. She was already there when I arrived, looking tired and worried. "He screwed up," she said as soon as I sat down. "David, he lost himself somewhere along the way. Got caught up in the idea of being the next tech genius, the next Zuckerberg." "That doesn't excuse what he did," I said quietly. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't. But I'm hoping we can fix this before it destroys everything, including your friendship." I almost laughed. Friendship? Lisa, he stole my work and then tried to erase me from the story completely. That's not something friends do. She pushed a folder across the table. "We want to make this right. The board is prepared to offer you a significant ownership stake in Quantum Leap, plus a seat on the Technical Advisory Committee. Full recognition for your contributions to the core technology." I opened the folder. The numbers made my head spin. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having. "And David?" I asked. "What does he say about this?" Lisa's hesitation told me everything. He'll come around. Once he sees it's the only way forward." I closed the folder. That's not good enough. "What do you want, Alex?" Lisa asked, frustration creeping into her voice. "Name your price." I leaned back, studying her face, so similar to David's, yet somehow kinder. "I want him to admit what he did. Publicly. No PR spin, no carefully worded statements about misunderstandings. The truth." "He'll never agree to that," she said quietly. "His pride won't let him." "Then we have nothing to discuss." I stood up, leaving the folder on the table. "I'll see you in court." The next morning, Quantum Leap's lawyers sent a cease and desist letter demanding I take down the website. I forwarded it to Maya without comment. Her response was immediate. "They're scared. The evidence is too strong, and they know it. Want to see something interesting?" She sent me a link to an SEC filing. Quantum Leap was preparing for an IPO, hoping to raise over $200 million. My website and the growing scandal threatened everything they'd built, or rather, everything they had stolen. "Their investors must be freaking out," Maya noted during our next meeting. "An IP dispute like this could tank the whole offering." She was right. Over the next few days, I received calls from various intermediaries trying to negotiate a settlement. The offers kept getting bigger, but they all had one thing in common. They wanted me to sign an NDA and pretend none of it had happened. I refused each one. Then came the threats. Anonymous emails suggesting I should think carefully about my future in tech. Comments on my website claiming I was mentally unstable, bitter, delusional. I recognized David's writing style in some of them. But I had support too. Former classmates came forward, confirming they remembered my work on the algorithm. My old professors vouched for my capabilities. The tech community, often quick to tear people down, rallied around the evidence I presented. One morning, I arrived at work to find an unexpected visitor waiting in the lobby, James Zhang, the CEO of RiverTech, one of Silicon Valley's most respected AI companies. "Interesting website you've got there," he said, extending his hand. "Want to get coffee?" Over the next hour, James laid out a proposition. RiverTech wanted to hire me not as an engineer, but as the head of a new AI development division. They'd fund my research, protect my intellectual property, and give me the resources to continue my work. "What's the catch?" I asked. "No catch. We've reviewed your code, your documentation. What you built, what was stolen from you. It's extraordinary. We want that kind of innovation at RiverTech. Properly credited, of course." It was tempting. Very tempting. "But I need to finish this first," I said. "I can't walk away and let them win." James nodded. "The offer stands. Handle your business, then come talk to us." That evening, as I was leaving the office, I got an urgent call from Maya. "Check your email. Now." There in my inbox was a message from David. The subject line: "I'm sorry." My hands shook as I opened it. "Alex, you were right. About everything. The algorithm, the code, all of it, it was yours. I got caught up in my own ambition and convinced myself I deserved the credit because I made it real. But that was a lie. I betrayed you, betrayed our friendship, our trust, everything we built together. The truth is, I was jealous. You were always the brilliant one, the true innovator. I just rode your coattails and then stole your glory. I've asked the PR team to draft a statement admitting everything. Lisa says it will probably kill the IPO. Maybe that's what I deserve. I know it's too late for us to ever be friends again, but for what it's worth, I'm sorry. David. I read the email 3 times before calling Maya. Is this real? I asked, not some PR stunt. It seems genuine, she said. Their lawyers just contacted me about drafting a settlement agreement. They're offering full credit, significant compensation, and a public admission of wrongdoing. I sat in silence, processing everything. Alex, what do you want to do? What did I want? The question had seemed so simple weeks ago. I wanted justice, recognition, vindication. Now that it was within reach, I wasn't so sure. I thought about all those nights in the computer lab, David and I dreaming about changing the world. About the countless dinners with his family, Lisa teasing us about our coding obsession. About the moment it all fell apart in that coffee shop. Set up a meeting, I said finally, not with their lawyers, with David. We met at our old college campus in the computer lab where it all began. David looked different, older, tired, the confidence drained from his posture. Your email, I said, sitting across from him. Did you mean it? He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. Every word. I lost myself, Alex, lost sight of everything that mattered. Why? We could have built this together. It could have been our success story, not just yours. Because I wanted to be you, he said quietly. You were always the genius, the one with the real vision. I was just there. When I saw the opportunity to take your work and make it mine, I convinced myself I deserved it, that I was just taking what should have been mine anyway. I looked around the lab at the computers where we'd spent so many hours coding, dreaming, building. You know this changes everything, right? The company, the IPO. I know, Lisa's furious. The board is probably going to fire me. He laughed bitterly. Turns out karma's real. We sat in silence for a while, years of friendship and betrayal hanging between us. I have an idea, I said finally. But you're not going to like it. 2 months later, Quantum Leap held a press conference. David stood at the podium, cameras flashing, and told the truth. All of it. He admitted to stealing my work, apologized publicly, and announced a restructuring of the company. Under the new arrangement, I became Chief Technology Officer, with full credit for the core technology. David stepped down as CEO but remained on the board. The company would move forward with both of us involved, each in our proper roles. The IPO was delayed but not canceled. When it finally happened 6 months later, the shares soared. Turned out the market appreciated honesty more than they feared scandal. Rivertech's James Zhang sent me a message. Interesting solution. The offer still stands if you ever change your mind. I kept his email but didn't respond. There was too much work to do at Quantum Leap, too many new ideas to explore. This time, with proper credit and protection. Lisa took over as CEO, proving to be a better leader than her brother ever was. She had the vision to see what Quantum Leap could become, not just an AI company, but a model for how tech companies could operate with transparency and integrity. As for David and me, we're not friends anymore, not like we were. Some betrayals cut too deep to fully heal. But we're colleagues now, working together professionally, each contributing in our own way. Sometimes, late at night in my new office, I look at the framed magazine cover on my wall. It's not the one that made me so angry. It's a newer one, showing David and me together under the headline, Quantum Leap, a story of innovation, betrayal, and redemption. The article tells the true story, not just of the technology, but of what happens when ambition overshadows friendship, and what's possible when honesty finally wins out. My phone buzzes. A text from Maya. Another acquisition offer. Want to hear it? I smile and type back, not interested. Some things aren't for sale. She responds with a thumbs up. She understands now what I learned through all of this. Success means nothing if you lose yourself along the way. The next morning, I pass David in the hallway. We nod to each other, professional but distant. He's changed, become humbler, more thoughtful. Sometimes I catch him watching me with what looks like regret. But that's his burden to bear, not mine. I have work to do, real work, building something that could actually change the world. This time with my name on it, my vision leading the way. And every line of code I write reminds me that some victories aren't about winning or losing. They're about standing up for what's right, about being true to yourself, even when it would be easier to give in. That's worth more than any IPO. I stared at Mark Davidson across his mahogany desk, maintaining a neutral expression as he delivered the news with barely concealed satisfaction. His words hung in the air between us. We're restructuring the department, and unfortunately, your position won't exist after next month. I see, I said quietly, watching his smirk grow wider. But before you go, he continued, leaning back in his leather chair, you'll need to train your replacement. Jennifer starts tomorrow. I expect you to show her everything about running our marketing division. Our marketing division. The irony of his words almost made me laugh. If only he knew. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and for the past 12 years, I've been the marketing director at Davidson Tech Solutions, or at least that's what everyone thought. The truth was far more interesting. 3 months ago, I had secretly purchased the entire company through a holding corporation I built over the years. Mark had no idea that the MKS Ventures that now own Davidson Tech was actually named after my initials, Sarah Catherine Mitchell. Of course, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I'll make sure Jennifer learns everything she needs to know. Mark nodded, clearly pleased with my docile response. Good. I knew you'd be professional about this. Too many people get emotional when they're let go. I thought about the stack of documents sitting in my lawyer's office, waiting to be filed tomorrow morning. Yes, emotions can certainly get in the way of business decisions. As I walked back to my office, I couldn't help but reflect on how I got here. 12 years ago, I'd started at Davidson Tech as a junior marketing associate. Back then, the company had been run by Mark's father, Robert Davidson, a brilliant businessman who saw potential in everyone, regardless of their gender or background. Under Robert's leadership, I'd flourished. He'd mentored me, challenged me, helped me grow from an eager rookie into a seasoned professional. When he promoted me to marketing director 7 years ago, he told me something I'd never forget. Sarah, success isn't just about making money. It's about building something that matters. But 3 years ago, Robert had passed away suddenly, leaving the company to his son. Mark had immediately started dismantling everything his father had built. The inclusive culture, the emphasis on innovation, the focus on employee growth. All of it replaced by a toxic environment of favoritism and short-term profit chasing. I watched as talented people were pushed out, replaced by Mark's drinking buddies and golf partners. The company's reputation began to suffer, our market share started slipping, and our best clients began looking elsewhere. That's when I started buying stock. It had begun as a small investment, just a few shares purchased through my personal account. But as Mark's mismanagement continued, more shareholders started selling. I created MKS Ventures as a holding company and began acquiring larger blocks of shares, always staying just under the threshold that would require public disclosure. 3 months ago, when one of the major institutional investors decided to sell their entire stake, I saw my opportunity. Through a complex series of transactions orchestrated by my lawyer, James Chen, MKS Ventures acquired controlling interest in Davidson Tech Solutions. He still doesn't suspect anything. Maya, my best friend and the company's head of HR, asked later that afternoon. She was one of only 3 people who knew the truth about MKS Ventures. I shook my head, organizing files on my desk. Not a clue. He's too busy congratulating himself on hiring Jennifer away from our biggest competitor. Maya snorted. You mean the competitor that's been losing market share for the past 2 years? The one that's about to be investigated for financial irregularities? The very same. I smiled, thinking about the stack of research I had on both Jennifer and her former employer. Mark thinks he's making a power move. He has no idea what's actually happening. When are you going to tell him? Tomorrow morning. James is filing the paperwork first thing, and then we're calling an emergency board meeting. I paused, looking at the photo on my desk. Me and Robert Davidson at the company's 10th anniversary celebration. It's time to put things right. Maya nodded, understanding in her eyes. Robert would be proud of you, you know. You're not just saving his company, you're making it better. I felt tears prick at my eyes but blinked them away. There would be time for emotions later. Right now, I had work to do. The next morning, I arrived early. Jennifer was already waiting in the lobby, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed corporate climber. Her resume had looked impressive at first glance, but I knew better. I'd done my homework. Jennifer, I greeted her warmly. Welcome to Davidson Tech. I'll be showing you the ropes over the next few weeks." She barely concealed her condescension as she looked me up and down. "That's very kind of you. Mark has told me all about the changes he's planning to implement." "I bet he has," I thought, leading her to my office. "Well, why don't we start with our current marketing strategy? I'm sure you'll find it enlightening." For the next 2 hours, I walked Jennifer through our campaigns, our client relationships, and our future plans. She interrupted frequently, making suggestions that showed she had no real understanding of our industry or our market position. "These retention strategies seem very old-fashioned," she said, gesturing dismissively at a presentation I'd created. "In my experience, aggressive acquisition is much more effective than maintaining existing relationships." I made a note on my pad. Her attitude was confirming everything my research had suggested about her previous employer's troubles. At 10 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from James. "Papers filed. Board members notified. Meeting set for 11. "Jennifer," I said, standing up, "I'm afraid we'll have to cut this morning's training short. There's an emergency board meeting I need to attend." She looked surprised. "Board meeting? But Mark didn't mention." "No," I smiled. "I don't suppose he did." I left her to my office and made my way to the conference room. Mark was already there, face red with anger as he talked on his phone. "What do you mean, emergency board meeting? I'm the CEO. I have to approve any board meetings." He looked up as I entered, covering the phone with his hand. "Sarah, what are you doing here? This is for executives only." "I know," I said calmly, taking a seat at the head of the table. "That's why I'm here." Before he could respond, other board members began filing in. I recognized most of them. The old guard who had served under Robert, gradually pushed to the sidelines by Mark over the past 3 years. James Chen arrived last, carrying a thick folder of documents. He nodded to me as he took his seat. "What's going on here?" Mark demanded, looking around the room. "I didn't authorize this meeting." "No," I said, standing up. "I did." The room fell silent as James began distributing documents to each board member. 3 months ago, I continued, my voice steady, MKS Ventures acquired controlling interest in Davidson Tech Solutions. As of this morning, that acquisition is complete and fully documented with the SEC. Mark's face went from red to white. MKS Ventures, but that's my company, I finished for him. Named after my initials, Sarah Catherine Mitchell. The board members were reading through the documents now, murmurs of surprise and understanding filling the room. "This is impossible," Mark sputtered. "You're just a marketing director. You can't afford to buy a company this size." I thought about the years of careful investment, the long nights spent studying financial reports, the strategic planning that had led to this moment. "Actually, Mark, I can." And I did. I opened my own copy of the documents. "Now shall we discuss the future of Davidson Tech Solutions?" The look on his face was everything I'd imagined it would be, a mix of shock, rage, and dawning comprehension. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about something much more important. I pulled out Robert Davidson's old photo from my folder and placed it on the table. "Your father built this company on principles of innovation, integrity, and respect for every employee. It's time to return to those values." Mark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. I'll have my lawyers look into this immediately. There's no way this takeover is legal." James Chen cleared his throat. "I assure you, Mr. Davidson, everything is perfectly legal. I've personally overseen every transaction. Would you like to see the documentation of how Ms. Mitchell acquired the shares?" I watched as James methodically laid out the paper trail, every stock purchase, every filing, every legal document that proved MKS Ventures' legitimate acquisition of Davidson Tech Solutions. "As you can see," James continued, his voice professionally neutral, "Ms. Mitchell now owns 51% of the company's shares. The board has been called today to vote on new leadership." Mark's face contorted with rage. "You sneaky little." "I'd choose your next words very carefully," I interrupted, my voice cool. "The board is watching." And they were. Every member sat alert, documents in hand, watching the drama unfold. Many of them had worked with Robert, had seen the company's decline under Mark's leadership. "Members of the board," I said, standing to address them directly, "for the past 3 years, we've watched this company lose market share, valuable employees, and most importantly, its identity. The culture of innovation and integrity that Robert Davidson built has been systematically dismantled. I began distributing another set of documents. Charts showing the company's declining performance under Mark's leadership. Our profit margins have dropped 40% in 3 years. We've lost 12 major clients. Employee turnover is at an all-time high. But more than that, we've lost our way. The board members nodded, examining the numbers. They'd seen the decline firsthand, even if they'd been powerless to stop it. This isn't just about numbers, I continued. It's about who we are as a company. Robert Davidson built this company to be more than just another tech firm. He wanted to create something that mattered. Oh, spare us the sentimental garbage, Mark spat. Business is about profit, not your precious feelings about my father. A board member, Janet Chen, no relation to James, spoke up. Actually, Mark, business is about sustainable growth and strong leadership. Something we haven't seen much of lately. Others began nodding in agreement. The tide was turning. I moved to vote on new leadership, Janet said firmly. I second the motion, another board member added. Mark looked around wildly, realizing he was losing control. You can't do this. I'm a Davidson. This is my company. No, I said quietly. It was your father's company, and he knew that leadership isn't inherited, it's earned. The vote was quick and decisive. Within 15 minutes, Mark Davidson was no longer CEO of Davidson Tech Solutions. Security was called to escort him from the building, his face purple with rage as he shouted threats about lawsuits and revenge. As the board filed out, Janet stayed behind. That couldn't have been easy, she said, squeezing my shoulder. But it was necessary. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. The hard part's just beginning. And it was. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. First, there was Jennifer to deal with. She'd been hired by Mark specifically to replace me, but her contract hadn't been finalized. After a brief conversation where I outlined my concerns about her previous employer's practices, she decided to pursue other opportunities. Then came the task of rebuilding. Maya and I worked late into the night, reviewing personnel files, identifying talented employees who'd been sidelined under Mark's leadership. Look at this, Maya said one evening, pulling up a file. Thomas Chen in engineering, he's been passed over for promotion 3 times, despite having multiple patents and excellent performance reviews. Let's set up a meeting, I replied. We need people like him in leadership positions. Slowly but surely, we began to reshape the company. I reinstated the mentorship program Robert had started. We revived the innovation lab that Mark had shut down. Most importantly, we started rebuilding the culture that had made Davidson Tech special. A month after the takeover, I sat in what had once been Mark's office, now significantly redecorated, reviewing our progress with Maya. Employee satisfaction scores are up 30%, she reported, and we've had 3 former employees reach out about coming back. I smiled, thinking about the changes we'd made. The office felt different now, more energetic, more alive. People weren't afraid to share ideas or raise concerns. But not everything was smooth sailing. Mark, true to his word, had his lawyers examine every aspect of the takeover. They found nothing irregular, but the scrutiny was stressful. Then there were the industry rumors he tried to spread, suggesting the company was unstable under new leadership. We answered those rumors with results. Within 6 months, we'd not only stabilized our market position but begun to grow again. Innovation, once stifled, flourished. New products were developed, new clients signed. 1 year after the takeover, I stood in front of the entire company at our annual meeting. The auditorium was packed. We'd hired over 100 new employees in the past year. When Robert Davidson founded this company, he had a vision, not just of creating successful products, but of building something meaningful, a place where innovation and integrity went hand in hand. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Some had been there under Robert's leadership, others were new, but all shared the same sense of purpose. For a while, we lost sight of that vision. But today, we're back on track. Our profits are up 45% from last year. Our employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. But more importantly, we're making a difference. I gestured to the screen behind me, showing our latest project. A collaborative effort between our tech team and local schools, helping bring STEM education to underprivileged communities. This is what success looks like, I continued. Not just numbers on a spreadsheet, but real impact on real people's lives. After the meeting, Maya found me in my office, staring at Robert's old photo. "He would be proud, you know," she said softly. I nodded, touching the frame gently. "I hope so. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, taking over the way I did." "Sarah," Maya said firmly, "you didn't just take over. You saved this company. Look at what you've built." She was right. In the past year, we'd done more than just restore the company. We'd made it better. Our technology was more innovative, our culture stronger, our impact greater. The photo on my desk wasn't just of Robert anymore. Next to it sat a new one, taken at our last company picnic. Hundreds of smiling faces, all part of something bigger than themselves. That evening, as I prepared to leave the office, I received an unexpected email. It was from Robert's widow, Margaret. "Dear Sarah, I've been watching what you've done with the company this past year. Robert always said you were special, that you understood what Davidson Tech was really about. He was right. Thank you for keeping his dream alive and for making it even better. With gratitude, Margaret." Tears pricked at my eyes as I read her words. This was why I'd done it, not for revenge against Mark, not for personal gain, but because some things are worth fighting for. The next morning, I arrived early as usual. The office was quiet, but not for long. Soon it would be filled with energy, ideas, and possibility. As I walked to my office, I passed the wall where Robert's old motto hung. "Success isn't just about making money. It's about building something that matters." I smiled, thinking about how far we'd come. Mark had thought he was pushing me out, forcing me to train my replacement. Instead, he'd inspired me to become something more. Not just an employee, but a leader. Not just a marketer, but a visionary. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's proving that you were right all along, that integrity, innovation, and respect aren't just nice words on a wall, but principles worth fighting for. As the office began to fill with employees, I heard the familiar buzz of creativity and collaboration. This was Robert Davidson's real legacy, not just a successful company, but a place where people could grow, innovate, and make a difference. And now it was my legacy too.
My name is Sandra Smith, and I'm 32 years old. About 3 years ago, I married my favorite person, Mike. We have a wonderful relationship, and I'm also very close to his sister, Emily. We get along like sisters. My husband and I have known each other for 10 years before getting married, so we are like parents to Emily. We've always wanted her to grow up well and have watched over her closely. When Emily reached an important milestone and got a marriage proposal from her fiancé, she wanted to introduce him to us, her surrogate parents. She said, "I would like to introduce my fiancé to you both." This was a very special moment for us because we had cared for Emily like our own daughter and were happy to see her finding a partner and striving for a happy future. It was a joyful time for me and my husband, Mike, and our hearts were full of happiness. Finally, the day came when Emily brought her fiancé, Daniel, to meet us. Daniel seemed to be around my age, maybe 32, and he was 5 years older than Emily. This made me realize she preferred older men. I observed him discreetly and was impressed by his solid features and calm demeanor. However, I noticed Daniel was glancing at me repeatedly. I wondered if he had something he wanted to say to me, or if something about me concerned him. Or was it just a coincidence? This question lingered in my mind. I quickly checked my clothing and hairstyle for any issues, but found nothing wrong. Perhaps realizing that staring at me was impolite, Daniel quickly averted his eyes. In the end, we couldn't understand why he was observing me so closely. Still, Mike and I decided not to worry about it and continued to introduce ourselves and converse with Emily and Daniel, who were sitting across the table from us. "Please take good care of my younger sister," was a classic phrase exchanged, and Mike responded with a smile, "Emily, I'm entrusting you to him." With this, Mike entrusted Emily's future happiness to Daniel, creating a warm atmosphere at the gathering and easing the initial tension of our first meeting. There was a moment when Mike asked Daniel a question he was curious about. Daniel, may I ask where you work? I was very interested in his answer and listened attentively. Daniel answered proudly, "You might have heard of it. I work at TE Company, which is growing rapidly right now." TE Company? Is that a famous game development company? I asked. Yes, that's right, Daniel replied. I actually changed jobs to work there last year. I didn't leave my previous job because I disliked it. TE Company directly scouted me because they valued my skills. So this is like a promotion. Don't worry, I didn't start as a regular employee, he explained. Hearing this, Mike and I were amazed. I widened my eyes in surprise, and our eyes met. Seeing our reactions, Daniel seemed convinced his story had impressed us, and he continued to speak with even more pride. That's why I would like you to trust me completely with Emily. I'm rapidly climbing the career ladder at TE Company and am progressing faster than most. Even though I started as a regular employee, my salary will quickly increase, and my position in the company will improve rapidly, so please rest assured, Daniel said. Hearing his words, I was so surprised that I was at a loss for words. TE Company is very famous, and I am well aware of it. Mike must also know of TE Company. However, he doesn't work there, so he might not know all the insider information. I think both Emily and Mike are aware that TE Company has a great reputation in the industry. However, it seemed like neither of them had imagined that her fiancé Daniel would quickly rise through the ranks at TE Company after joining. I never imagined that Daniel's career was progressing so quickly. There were parts of his story that made me feel a bit uneasy. But I decided to believe him when he talked about being recruited by TE Company and climbing the career ladder at an incredible pace. As our conversation shifted away from work topics, I eagerly asked Daniel and Emily about how they first met. They said they were introduced by a mutual friend. Daniel was looking for a life partner, but didn't like attending matchmaking events, so he met Emily through a trusted friend. Emily was interested in having a boyfriend, but wasn't actively looking, so she agreed to meet Daniel when a friend suggested it. I really love how Daniel makes me smile, Emily shared. His slightly awkward but adorable side really captures my heart. As they shared their feelings with us, it was as sweet as sugar, even though we weren't eating anything sweet. Their close bond and deep affection for each other were very clear. However, there was something that bothered me. As they were leaving our house, Daniel and I walked them to the front door. Daniel started talking to Emily about bringing rice and other gifts. Then, while standing a bit apart, Daniel approached me and suddenly asked, "Hey, do you perhaps not remember me?" I tilted my head in surprise at his unexpected question. "Do you really not remember me?" he asked again, sounding a bit skeptical. I couldn't recall anyone named Daniel from my past. He was handsome, but no specific memories came to mind. Seeing me trying hard to remember, Daniel sighed slightly, unable to hide his disappointment. "Well then, let's exchange contact information, and please tell Michael later." "I forgot to exchange contacts with him," Daniel said. I was shocked by his sudden informal tone. We might have known each other before, but I didn't remember any close relationship with someone who would speak so casually. Inside, I was full of questions. Who is he? What kind of relationship did we have? But since Emily was present, I decided it wasn't the right time to ask these questions, so I stayed silent. After we exchanged contact information, I decided to clear up my doubts by texting him later. Before I could reach out, Daniel messaged me first, saying, "I'm surprised that the girl who used to sit quietly in the corner of the classroom when we were in elementary school is now married before me. To tell you the truth, your face hasn't changed much since then, so I recognized you right away. I grew up in a town far from here, and during my elementary school days, I was often teased by my classmates. To escape those painful memories, my family and I moved away when I started middle school. In the new city, I met my wonderful friend Michael, and we gradually built a strong bond. My elementary school memories are painful, and I prefer not to think about them. I was surprised by Daniel's words and asked, "What are you talking about?" I didn't want anyone to misunderstand my contact with Emily's fiancé Daniel, so I explained that our messages were exchanged through Michael. We agreed that in the future, whenever Daniel and I needed to communicate, Michael would be with us to facilitate a three-way conversation. I didn't share the details of my past with Daniel. After I explained the situation, Daniel smiled warmly and asked, "Do you remember being called pure girl in elementary school?" The term had a specific background. It was used to tease me by my classmates. They took it from the word poor because I came from a single-parent family. Although we weren't struggling financially, some of the other mothers had said to my mom, "It must be tough financially because you're a single parent." This rumor spread among the children, leading to teasing. To change our situation, we decided to move to a new place. My mom also considered taking legal action against the moms who spread rumors like, "They must be living a frugal life because they are a single-parent family, probably even using cardboard boxes to prepare meals." This decision influenced our move to our new home. I hadn't heard the nickname Pure Girl, which was once used to tease me, in a long time. One day, I was surprised when a middle-aged man admitted he didn't even know the meaning of the word poor. I calmly told him, "Please be careful with your words. You are my sister-in-law's fiancé, and our relationship doesn't go beyond that. Please don't say meaningless things." After that, he stopped messaging me. Maybe he realized he should stop making rude remarks. Watching this exchange, Michael seemed upset by the man's words, and I could see his face cloud over with anger. "What on earth is that man thinking?" Michael said. "He doesn't seem to understand that he's dealing with the sister-in-law of the woman he's about to marry. He brings up the past from elementary school and acts like you're still kids. Isn't that crazy?" Seeing Michael tremble with rage, I tried to calm him down. I was also concerned, so I called my mom and asked her to look for a class photo from my elementary school days to see if there was a classmate named Daniel. My mom quickly found a boy named Daniel and said over the phone, "Wasn't this Daniel the main one who used to bully you?" At that moment, memories I had forgotten came back to me. The one who bullied me the most was indeed Daniel. I asked her to send me the photo from my elementary school days. Looking at the photo, I saw that Daniel had a much larger, chubby physique back then, which is probably why I didn't recognize him now. After that, I decided to investigate the situation further. A few months after our first meeting, I received a call from Emily. "Sandra, we haven't received your RSVP for the wedding invitation yet. You and your brother are planning to attend, right?" "What wedding invitation?" I asked. My husband and I had been looking forward to receiving the invitation, but it never reached us. When I told Emily about it, she seemed surprised and said, "I definitely sent it. Maybe there was a problem somewhere. Anyway, I'll come and give it to you directly tomorrow." She was very sincere about it. The next day, Michael and I received the invitation directly from Emily, and we confirmed we would attend. We had no idea what was waiting for us at the wedding or how much it would ripple through everything. On the wedding day, Emily was dressed in a pure white wedding gown, looking like an angel. I congratulated her on starting her new life, tears in my eyes. But then the groom, Daniel, ruined the celebratory mood. I wished for Emily's happiness and wanted the wedding to be a success. But when Daniel spoke, he pointed at me. Michael, Emily, and I were all surprised. "Why are you here?" I deliberately didn't send an invitation, he said, looking displeased. It seems Daniel made sure that Michael and I didn't receive an invitation. This woman grew up with just her mother. When things get tough, she runs away. That must have caused financial hardship. Now she's found a man from a wealthy family, thinking she can live a carefree life. She's a dreamy woman who can't see reality. Daniel accused me without knowing anything about my past. Michael, sitting next to me, clenched his fist in anger. I gently told him to calm down. Daniel continued with his false accusations. I hold an important position at the well-known tea company. If I marry Emily, are you planning to use your position as my sister-in-law to take money from me? His friends were shocked and started talking amongst themselves. They seemed to share Daniel's narrow perspective. I approached a staff member nearby and asked for the microphone. Daniel smirked, perhaps expecting me to say something emotional. I responded calmly, "It's ridiculous that someone who can't even remember the face of the president at their own company dares to call themselves an elite. Think carefully. If you intend to sever ties with me, I'll be waiting in the president's office tomorrow, and we'll proceed with HR procedures." After saying that, I handed the microphone back to the staff and confidently returned to my seat. Michael stood up and headed toward the exit. Soon after, Emily started to walk in the same direction. Noticing this, Daniel called out to her, "Wait a minute. Why are you going that way too?" "I'm just trying to break things off with her." "If that's the case, there shouldn't be any problems, right?" Daniel, still not fully understanding the situation, spoke to Emily. She gave him a cold look and said, "You really don't know Sandra. She's the CEO of Tea Company. I have deep respect and admiration for my sister Sandra. I can't forgive you for belittling her. I'm breaking off this engagement right now. You've ruined such an important day in our lives. Be prepared." Shocked by Emily's stern words, Daniel was completely taken aback. Sandra decided to talk to the venue staff and remove her wedding dress. She informed the guests that the banquet would be cancelled, and the wedding would be changed to a simple meal gathering, making it clear that this kind of behavior would not be tolerated again. She firmly blamed Daniel for the breakup of the engagement. The ordeal wasn't over yet. The next day, as I had warned him, I calmly waited for Daniel's arrival in the president's office. Beside me stood two large, muscular employees, ready to step in if necessary. When Daniel arrived, he seemed confident at first, but that soon changed. He entered the president's office without permission and sat down without greeting anyone, which was quite rude. "No way. I can't believe you're really the president. This is unbelievable," he said. "If you had done any research, you would have found my information on our company's website," I replied. "Didn't you check before coming here?" It seemed he didn't take my words seriously and didn't bother to find out the truth. He probably thought I was joking or exaggerating. I told him, "I am thinking of terminating your employment contract." "What are you thinking? It's not fair to make such a decision over a slight misunderstanding," he said. "I will consult with the Labor Standards Inspection Office." As he tried to persuade me, I calmly placed a copy of his resume in front of him. "You have falsified your educational background, haven't you? You've claimed to have qualifications and skills you don't actually have, like proficiency in Excel and video editing. Are these statements true?" "About that part," he started, clearly caught off guard. "Falsifying information and making false claims are legitimate reasons for us to terminate your employment," I said directly. He looked shocked at my statement. From the moment I met him, I had a strange feeling about him. I later verified the facts. Our company doesn't usually use headhunting methods, and even if we do, I would meet and interview the recommended candidates directly. I had no memory of having a deep conversation with Daniel. He actually joined our company through the regular recruitment process for mid-career hires and started as a regular employee. He called himself someone aiming for promotion and claimed to be proficient in software, but he had no skills in using them, so he was never promoted. He had a high opinion of himself, and I investigated his attitude thoroughly. Even during work hours, he was lazy, just enjoying being part of the company. I had no intention of tolerating such behavior. Now, with his engagement to Emily officially ended, and since he continued to behave unpleasantly, I saw no reason to keep him around. I told Daniel to leave the company immediately. Since he had been with us for less than 6 months, there was no need to consider severance pay or the handover of duties. As an old friend, won't you help me out? He pleaded. I see no reason to continue our relationship, I replied, arranging for other staff to handle his departure from the company. It seemed he was hoping for financial support from his father, but since his father had cut off support due to Daniel's behavior, that didn't happen. There was an incident in the past where my mother sued for defamation, and it seems Daniel's mother was involved. My father had paid the compensation back then, so he was familiar with such situations. Faced with a similar situation with Daniel, his father probably felt he had reached his limit and disappeared from their lives. After that, Daniel spent his days taking care of his elderly mother while dealing with the financial consequences of his actions. Eventually, he disappeared, taken away by some mysterious people in black, and no one knows where he is now. Someone might know what happened to him, but I have no intention of finding out. On the other hand, Emily was initially deeply hurt when she found out about Daniel's background. However, time heals all wounds. About 6 months have passed, and she now believes it was for the best that they didn't get married. Recently, she started smiling again and has even participated in events to find a new partner. Seeing Emily happy and living a brighter life again, Michael and I are truly relieved. In fact, it seems they are now actively.
Emily sneered at me and said, "Thanks for quitting." I met her gaze, silently staring back without a word. "It's about cutting labor costs. We don't need a hag who exploits overtime pay at our company," she added, clearly pleased with herself. Tom seemed satisfied, too. A week later, I received a call from the company. As soon as I picked up, the president's voice came through the line. "Who exactly are you?" he demanded. I laughed mockingly at his words. "I'm Lily Johnson," I replied. "I turned 59 this year and have been working at this company for 37 years since graduating from college. Our company employs administrative scriveners, social insurance labor consultants, and tax accountants to handle clerical work for our clients. This is particularly popular with company presidents who run their businesses alone and lack time for administrative tasks. We take care of those tasks for them." I worked in the tax department. I had earned my bookkeeping and tax accountant qualifications during college, which is why I joined the company in the first place. Currently, I manage 45 clients, which keeps me extremely busy. Although a part-timer helps with the accounting entries, the workload is still overwhelming. However, I refuse to show any weakness. Our clients have been with us for a long time, and many have faced their fair share of hardships. Seeing them deal with adversity motivates me not to give up. So, here I am, sitting in front of my computer again today. Lately, I've been troubled. Tom and Emily have been subjecting me to insidious harassment. Tom, who is 7 years younger than me, is the head of the tax department. He used to be just a regular colleague, but his attitude changed drastically 3 months ago when he got promoted. He used to speak politely, but suddenly, he started talking down to me. "Lily, what are you doing? You've got some nerve slacking off during work hours," he'd say, always either sarcastic or complaining. "I'm looking at documents for tax-saving strategies for our clients," I would retort. but Tom remained unfazed. Just check the manual for that. Don't do anything unnecessary, and if you end up working overtime, don't expect to get paid for it. Tom glared at me, his words filled with disdain. Unable to respond, I turned to Emily, Tom's assistant. She chimed in, "Lily, you should work more efficiently. At this rate, you'll never finish. That's why you're still a rank-and-file employee." Emily laughed mockingly. I was the first to be offered the promotion to department head, but I declined at the time. Taking the head position meant more management responsibilities and less interaction with clients. However, this was an internal offer, so Tom and Emily don't know about it. "I'll make sure to complete my regular duties as well," was all I could manage to say. Still, Tom and Emily's harassment continued. "You're increasing overtime again? What a waste." Tom's angry voice echoed through the office. "Lily, cut it out. Your constant overtime is dragging down the whole tax department's performance." Emily sighed. The reason for yesterday's overtime was simple. Tom had accumulated a month's worth of declaration forms that needed to be filed by the end of the month. After work yesterday, Tom suddenly said, "Take care of these," and left several client files on my desk. I turned pale when I saw the files. "Wait, these all have deadlines this month, right?" I asked, confused. By then, Tom was already nowhere near. Looking for him, I saw he was already packing up at his desk. "I'm heading out. Take care," he said and quickly left the office. "Good luck." Emily followed Tom out, laughing mockingly. Unbelievable. I sighed and opened the client files left on my desk. Moreover, some of the files were Emily's responsibility. I sighed even deeper. I knew why Tom was harassing me. They wanted me to retire quickly. I have more experience and deeper knowledge of taxation than he does. So other members of the tax department come to me with their questions instead of Tom. There are other reasons why everyone avoids Tom. He looks greasy and unapproachable, and the only female employee who stays near him is Emily. Tom likes young women, which is probably why he wants me to retire, so the other female employees will rely on him more. It's such shallow thinking. It gives me chills. There's also the fact that he simply doesn't like me. Emily was harassing me to curry favor with Tom. Tom evaluates the performance of the tax department, so she probably wanted to undermine me to get a good evaluation from him. Anyway, I have to manage these declarations. Not only do I have to prepare the tax declarations for my assigned companies, but it looks like I won't be able to finish today's work either. But if I try to claim overtime, I resigned myself to the prospect of unpaid overtime, knowing I'd only get complaints from Tom and Emily. Then, one day, I was suddenly called into the president's office. Our company had just undergone a change in leadership. The president's father, who had managed the company since its founding, had recently fallen ill and handed it over to his son. The new president had worked elsewhere and wasn't fully familiar with our operations yet, but he had little choice in the matter. "Excuse me," I said as I entered the president's office. I noticed Tom and Emily were already there, both with unpleasant smirks on their faces. "Why are Tom and Emily here?" I muttered quietly to myself. In this tense and strange atmosphere, the president spoke. "Lily, we'll need you to resign by the end of this month." "Excuse me? What do you mean?" I asked, my mind spinning. "I've heard from Tom and Emily that you've been overbilling for overtime," the president explained. "Other members of the tax department only have about 15 hours of overtime per month, but you're already over 80 hours. Don't you find that odd? Tom and Emily have 0 overtime this month. Impressive, right?" He looked at me sternly. The reason my overtime was so high this month was that I was doing Tom and Emily's work. But if I said it was Tom's instructions, it would make me seem incapable of managing my own time, so I just stated the facts. "I haven't overbilled for overtime," It's a result of not being able to finish my work within regular hours. The president sighed deeply. I'm doubtful, but there's no evidence, so I won't pursue it further. However, we can't continue to employ someone who works that slowly, so I want you to resign. The president seemed to have made up his mind. I was being asked to leave the company I had dedicated my entire 37-year career to. I felt exhausted. No matter how much extra work I did, it was never appreciated. Instead, I ended up taking on Tom and Emily's tasks as well. Yes, I understand. I'll resign at the end of this month, I found myself saying to the president. I glanced at Tom and Emily, who were smiling smugly, clearly pleased with the outcome. After leaving the president's office, Emily looked at me and said, "Thanks for quitting," sneering as she met my gaze. I silently stared back at her. Tom gave me the same condescending look. "We're cutting labor costs. We don't need a hag who exploits overtime pay at our company," he added, clearly pleased with himself. While watching the two of them chatter cheerily, I thought about the handover process and began creating the handover documents for all my clients. Of course, I didn't miss saying goodbye to the people I was handing over to. For the clients I couldn't meet in person, I sent letters informing them of my successor. A week after I resigned, I was finally relaxing at home. I had been busy with the handover until my last day and had been extremely busy even before that. A little relaxation seemed well-deserved. Just as I was thinking this, my mobile phone rang. The call was from the company. What could they want now? I made sure to take care of the social insurance procedures. I didn't answer the phone initially, but then the company called several more times. In fact, I had also received several calls from Tom and Emily's personal mobile phones. Perhaps they thought I'd answer if the call came directly from them. Reluctantly, I decided to pick up. "Hello? Lily, it's a mess right now." As soon as I answered, the president's voice came through. "Who exactly are you?" I laughed mockingly at his words. "Who am I? Just an unemployed lady. I've resigned from the company, and I'm nothing else right now." The president spoke urgently. "Since you left, we've had 49 calls to stop transactions with the company. Please come back immediately." He finished speaking and hung up. He must be really panicked. I guess I have no choice. I got up reluctantly and headed to the company. As soon as I arrived, I saw Tom and Emily waiting. Their faces were pale, and they both had dark circles under their eyes. "What's wrong with both of you?" I asked, surprised at their drastic change in appearance. Tom glared at me. "Since you left, we've been getting calls one after another to stop transactions, not just from your clients, but from prospective companies we were planning to introduce. What did you do?" Emily looked at me with suspicion. I never thought Lily would do something so underhanded. I'm truly disillusioned. The reason they both looked so haggard was probably due to dealing with all the cancellations. Of course, I hadn't done anything to the clients, but I had a guess why they were canceling their transactions. "Well, the cancellations might be unavoidable this time," I muttered. Tom yelled, "So you did do something, didn't you? Get to the president's office now." He took me to the president's office. "President, I brought her," Tom declared forcefully as he opened the door. Emily followed quickly behind him. "Oh, I've been waiting," the president said, looking me in the eyes. Tom accused me as if I were the culprit. "It appears that Lily was involved in the cessation of transactions with our clients. We should not only make her resign but also sue her for damages," Emily argued vehemently, though she spoke carefully in front of the president. Ignoring them, the president turned to me and asked, "Why did so many companies stop doing business with us after Lily left?" The president looked at me intently, waiting for an explanation. I took a deep breath and answered clearly, "Don't you understand? Our clients didn't need us just to manage their taxes. There are plenty of tax accountant firms that do it cheaper. They stayed with us because I was here. Tom snapped at me. What's with that attitude towards the president? You think you're worth that much? Emily taunted. There's no way it's because of Lily. The president looked serious as I explained. Tom and Emily work based on the manual, optimizing operations, but I do more than that. I offer tax-saving strategies tailored to each client's situation. Uniform responses don't always serve the client's best interests. Many clients preferred my approach and stayed because of it. Tom was furious. How can we afford to give such detailed attention to each case? It takes too much time. That's right. It's inefficient, Emily agreed emphatically. The president sighed deeply and said, Actually, I just got a call from my dad, the former president. Some of the clients who stopped transactions contacted him directly to discuss the situation with Lily. I was surprised to hear this. I hadn't expected the clients to go that far for me. Dad said that the tax department was viable because of Lily. She not only managed her clients but also supported her colleagues' clients. She has knowledge that Tom can't match. Dad also mentioned that if Lily hadn't declined, she would have been in a higher position than department head by now. The president spoke with a pained expression. No way, Emily said, looking shocked. She probably couldn't believe that I might have been her boss. The president continued. I'm really sorry for asking you to resign, but can we revoke your resignation? Lily, you're needed at our company. My father also insisted strongly. I was honestly happy about the president's change of heart, but I couldn't accept his offer immediately. Then Tom interrupted our conversation. President, what do you mean she's better than me? I can't accept this. Tom was visibly upset. Emily protested as well. Tom is a wonderful boss who cares for his subordinates, and yet you choose Lily over him? That's unacceptable. The president looked sternly at them. Actually, since Lily resigned, we've received numerous complaints from the tax department. You two seem to have been pushing your work onto others, haven't you? What? Why would you? Tom's face turned pale. The president continued with a look of disgust. I've heard from the employees that you, Tom, have been assigning your client declaration forms to your subordinates, including Emily's work for many clients. Standing next to Tom, who was getting paler, Emily trembled as her name was mentioned. There was also a report that you've been pushing your work onto Lily until she resigned. You were calling her a salary thief, but it seems the roles were reversed, weren't they? The president sighed. No, that's not. Tom was visibly flustered, unable to come up with an excuse. Observing Tom and Emily turning pale together, the president continued. Also, there was a report that you two are in a relationship. You were often seen leaving work together. But, Tom, you're married, aren't you? The president glared at Tom and Emily. I was just mentoring Emily as her superior. Nothing inappropriate. Tom struggled to find the words. The president produced several receipts. These are receipts questioned by the accounting department. These dining expenses filed by Tom, who were they with? Certainly not clients, right? Tom was sweating profusely, unable to speak. Emily's face turned ghostly pale. Tom and Emily, you've neglected your duty and inflated expense claims. Plus, you're having an affair in the office despite being married. According to company policy, I'm terminating your employment as of today, the president told them calmly and straightforwardly. Tom and Emily tried to resist. Please wait. I'll retract the receipt claims. Just don't fire me. I have a family, Tom pleaded desperately. Emily did the same. Please. I don't want to be fired. I'll apologize to Lily and the others for offloading work on them. She was on the verge of tears, realizing the severity of being fired for neglecting work and having an affair with a supervisor. She must have been worried about her reputation. I advised them, "Why don't you just stop resisting? It's undignified." Tom glared at me. "Shut up. What would a single person like you understand?" I sighed and replied, "Tom, you were the one who got me fired. It's just karma, what goes around comes around. Why don't you take some responsibility and reflect a bit?" "Damn it." Tom looked frustrated, and Emily bit her lip. "And I haven't reported this yet. But there's more to Tom and Emily's misconduct. Should I share more details?" I asked the president with a smile. Tom and Emily's behavior was well known in the tax department. Their stories had reached me, whether I liked it or not. "No, please don't. Lily, stop." They both pleaded frantically, trying to stop me. I gave them an ultimatum. Wrongdoings eventually come to light. It would be better for you to face reality before it gets worse. At my words, both of them collapsed to their knees. Ultimately, Tom and Emily were fired on the spot. I revealed their misdeeds afterward, which included Tom faking business trips to spend time with Emily and harassing employees they disliked into quitting. I tried to help those employees, but Tom and Emily's tactics were insidious. They repeatedly reprimanded and pressured employees out of my sight. It was also common for them to suddenly assign work with tight deadlines. The employees who resigned had asked me to keep quiet, but now they are happily working at other companies, so I decided it was okay to speak up. The president was furious at my revelation. He expressed his anger about cutting their final salaries and planned to thoroughly investigate past inflated expense claims. Tom was begging the president, tears in his eyes, "Please don't cut my salary. What will I tell my family if they find out?" Eventually, Tom and Emily's affair was exposed to Tom's wife, and he ended up getting divorced. The two are now facing claims for compensation in the divorce lawsuit. I know this because, for some reason, Tom contacted me. "Please, can you persuade the president to reconsider the firing? Emily and I are in a real bind now." Apparently, Tom and Emily are struggling to find new jobs. The tax industry is somewhat insular, and if you commit too many misdeeds, word spreads quickly through the industry's network. That's why no one is willing to hire them. However, they need money for divorce compensation and living expenses, so now they're working day labor jobs, like at construction sites. People used to office work suddenly doing hard labor outdoors must be tough. Emily often calls me crying, "Lily, please help. I just wanted a raise and a better life. I never really liked Tom, and this situation is unbearable," Emily would say, crying. However, Tom and Emily's predicament is their own doing. Many people, including myself, have been victims of their actions. So I told Emily, "This is all your own fault. Emily, you can't unring a bell. It will be hard to return to the same path. You're just going to have to deal with the hardships." "No way," Emily cried out in despair. This was the outcome of Emily's actions. I hope she continues to regret her actions in the future. As for me, I'm still enjoying a relaxed lifestyle away from work. The president has been begging me to return, but I have declined. After being told once to resign, I don't think I'll go back. Sometimes I help out at a friend's tax office to earn a bit of money. Maybe once things settle down, I'll start my own office like my friend. In my own office, no one can complain about my working style. I can fully dedicate myself to my clients. As a tax accountant, I want to be on equal footing with my clients, not as a teacher but as part of the service industry. My second life has just begun, and I'm looking forward to delving into what I want to do next.
Has it really been that many years? Is my dad still alive? My ex-husband, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, approached me with a smirk, his voice dripped with sarcasm. Just a short while ago, he'd have done anything to avoid seeing me, so this sudden approach puzzled me. I wondered what had changed. I considered asking him directly but wasn't interested in hearing excuses about the past. From his perspective, I probably looked impassive. His irritation flared, and he snapped, "Well, aren't you going to say anything after all this time? Are you too shy to speak?" His absurd assumption made me chuckle inwardly. Not wanting any misunderstandings, I smiled and gave him the truth. "Why would I be shy? Your father recently passed away, and I inherited $7 million from him." The shock on his face was almost amusing. I couldn't help but laugh at his astonishment. "I'm Millie, a 48-year-old ordinary housewife. I live happily with my husband and take care of my father-in-law in our home. We married later in life and, due to various reasons, never had children. Sometimes I think it was for the best. I first met my husband over 10 years ago when my company, which I joined after university, competed against his company in a project. After our company won first place in the competition, he approached me at the celebration party. He was genuinely considerate and caring, and we quickly bonded. Despite our busy work schedules, we started dating. Eventually, he proposed. But life wasn't just about romance. His family consisted only of his father, as his mother had passed away when he was young. His father had been a reliable figure in a reputable local factory for years. However, shortly after he graduated from university and started his new life, his father lost his eyesight completely in a factory accident. Living alone became a significant challenge, and his father needed constant support. When my parents learned the situation, they strongly opposed our marriage. Despite their objections, he asked me with tears in his eyes, "I want you to help me support my father." His earnest plea touched me deeply. So, despite our parents' disapproval, we decided to care for his father together. He requested that I take a break from my job to help out, and we ended the contract with the caregiver who had been assisting us. I promised to assist with his father's daily needs, and thus began a new chapter in my life, one that, at the time, I approached with a bit of naive optimism. I accepted his request without much thought, and thus began my daily routine of caring for my father-in-law. However, I soon realized that caregiving was far more challenging than I had anticipated. What shocked me even more was how my husband had changed. Before we married, he was incredibly considerate and attentive, but once we settled into married life, he began to change. For instance, one evening when I was overwhelmed with the demands of caregiving and unable to prepare dinner, he quietly began eating a meal he had bought from a burger shop. While preparing dinner was my responsibility, a simple acknowledgement of my effort, like "it must have been tough for you" or "do you need help," would have made a world of difference. After eating, he left his trash on the table and went straight to bed after a shower. His attitude made me feel isolated, as if I were merely a free helper in his life. This was how our life began. I wish we could communicate and understand each other better. Noticing the tension, my father-in-law gently held my hand and apologized. His kindness brought tears to my eyes. I acted like everything was fine in front of him and said it was okay, but inside, I felt differently. As the days went by, I continued to navigate daily life, struggling with his coldness. One day, I voiced my feelings to him, but he responded, "I'm just taking care of my own stuff," as if he didn't understand my perspective. His response only made me feel more distant. Over time, I gradually adapted to taking care of my father-in-law and managed household tasks more smoothly. As I spent more time with him, our bond deepened, but increasingly, there were nights when my husband wouldn't come home and impromptu meals out became more frequent. I kept telling myself that it was just the two of us, my father-in-law and me, holding things together. Then one day, those words came out of nowhere, and something inside me felt shattered, leaving me with an overwhelming sense of loneliness. "Hey," he started, "lately you haven't been saying my name as often. It's been 2 years since we married, but somehow, the warmth we felt in the beginning has faded. I want to talk. Come to the living room." A naive hope bubbled up within me. Perhaps he was considering mending our relationship. My father-in-law, sensing the tension, had retreated to his room to give us some alone time. With a flicker of hope, I headed to the living room, where a piece of paper lay on the table. He glanced at me and said, "Sit here," and I quietly took the seat next to him. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized the paper. "You know what this is, right?" he said with a grin that lacked the warmth it once had. "I've already sent a petition for divorce to the court." His demeanor was infuriating, but I found myself staring at the paper instead of reacting. "If you don't respond to the court within 30 days, the divorce will be finalized. I just want out of this life." The words felt foreign and disorienting, leaving me speechless. I let out a surprise. What? His annoyance was palpable as he casually tossed a pen in my direction. Do you even understand what I'm saying? I want a divorce. I'm starting a new life with the daughter of a company president, so I need you to speed up the proceedings. His frantic rambling felt like a roller coaster, twisting and turning my heart with each revelation. With all my father-in-law's care and household chores, this was a reality I was struggling to accept. Lately, I had been swamped with work, leaving us little time together. I never imagined that he was having an affair. Then, as I began connecting the dots, his changed attitude, coming home later than usual, and other signs, I struggled to accept the reality of his betrayal. When I thought about the bond we shared and the relationship with my father-in-law, I couldn't grasp how we had ended up here. His eyes were cold and the determination in his words was unmistakable. Overwhelmed, I found myself at a loss for how to respond. After my father-in-law lost his sight, his hearing had become exceptionally sharp. He could detect even the faintest sounds in the house. Given the age of the home he built, it wasn't soundproof, so he must have overheard our entire conversation. For a moment, I considered seeking my father-in-law's help, but then I realized I couldn't expose him to this turmoil. Continuing in this way would bring no happiness to either of us. This thought weighed heavily on me as I picked up the pen he had tossed and began shakily signing the affidavit. Finally getting it, huh? Good. Now I can be free, he said, as if it were a victory. Before you took on caring for my father, we had a caregiver who left at night, so I had to care for him alone, waking up multiple times. It was hard, but after marrying you, I could finally sleep through the night. He spoke as if pleading his case, but I closed off my heart to his words. I no longer wanted to be swayed by him. After I finished signing, he quickly grabbed the papers, carefully checking each word. With a satisfied smirk, he looked at me before leaving the room. I heard him humming as he packed a large bag and hurried out of the house. Watching him leave, I felt a surge of anger and frustration, my cries echoing in the empty space. After he left, the house was enveloped in silence, leaving only me and my blind father-in-law. I lost track of how much time had passed before my father-in-law placed his hand gently on my shoulder. Despite his blindness, I felt as if he understood my feelings. He had probably sensed the earlier confrontation and the tension between us. Our home, though filled with darkness for him, was familiar ground. Even without sight, he could navigate it with ease. Perhaps he had come to check on me, concerned to find me alone and upset. I clung to this sturdy frame, allowing myself to cry freely. I had always cherished caring for him. These moments were precious and gave my life purpose. Yet the change in my ex-husband was painful. The kindness he once showed at the beginning of our marriage had turned into coldness over time, leaving me deeply hurt. I wondered if my focus on his small actions and words was merely a way of justifying my feelings. About 10 years later, feeling a need to break away from my routine, I ventured out for the first time in a while. As I entered the shopping mall, the fresh air, sparkling shop fronts, and the smiles of people around me lifted my spirits. It felt as if the gloomy clouds over my heart were clearing. Then, a voice cut through the pleasant moment, bringing with it a rush of painful memories. Oh, how many years has it been? Is my dad still alive? The familiar voice made me tremble. It was my ex-husband. For a moment, everything went dark, but I gathered the courage to look at him. He wore the same smug smile as always, and the unpleasant memories of our past resurfaced. Taking a deep breath, I stared at him, unflinching. I was no longer swayed by his words. I looked him squarely in the eyes, shaking off the shadows of the past and reaffirming my resolve to move forward. When my ex-husband appeared unexpectedly, I was momentarily taken aback and stayed silent. He broke the silence with a smirk. Aren't you going to say anything? Are you shy after all this time? I decided to let my mischievous side show and told him about my father-in-law's passing and how I had inherited $7 million. His eyes widened in shock, and I couldn't help but laugh at his astonishment. The thrill of seeing his reaction was exhilarating, and I silently reveled in the moment. Want to grab a coffee and chat? I suggested, not really planning to delve further into the inheritance but curious to catch up after such a long time. We sat down, and I mustered the courage to ask about his current situation. He spoke quite openly about his job, revealing that he was doing something different now. His unchanged arrogance was a bit irritating, but I stayed calm, observing his reactions. So, how are things with the daughter of that company president? I asked, teasing him slightly. From what he mentioned about his new job, I guess he might have left his previous company. If so, things might not be going smoothly with his new situation. He looked momentarily perplexed, then sighed and said in a low voice, "To be honest, things are a bit rocky, but who cares? Is the inheritance story true? Did you really get $7 million? Share some with me." His clear expectation made me chuckle. "Why should I share?" I replied, "Your name was indeed in the will." His face showed a mix of surprise and anger as he blurted out, "Why didn't you tell me? I can't believe you." Feigning surprise, I said, "Oh, you wanted to hear. I'm sorry." A smirk tugged at my lips as I observed the shock on my ex-husband's face. Inside, I felt a deep sigh. "You know," I began, "I tried calling you several times back then, but you never answered. I wanted to inform you about your father's passing. In the end, I couldn't reach you, and in his will, your name was indeed listed. However, it clearly stated that you were not to receive a penny. Should I have still informed you?" I asked, letting a hint of sarcasm color my voice as I faced his bewildered expression. My mind drifted back to last fall when my father-in-law passed away peacefully. By then, it had been 9 years since our divorce. One evening, I spent some quiet time with him. Usually, he'd fall asleep as soon as he lay down, but that night was different. He sat there, wide awake, showing no signs of sleep. Noting his unusual demeanor, I asked, "What's the matter? If you're cold, I can bring you a warmer blanket." He simply pointed to a small box. "Open this box tomorrow and call the person whose business card is inside," he instructed in a calm, deliberate tone. "Do you have any plans?" I asked. He gently shook his head with a smile. "No, but look forward to your birthday this year." Every year, my father-in-law would give me something special, a tradition he maintained thanks to the support from his previous employer before he lost his sight. Even after our divorce, his support allowed me to lead a comfortable life without needing to work. The morning after our conversation, the house was unusually silent. The comforting sound of his breathing, which I had grown accustomed to, was absent. The room was still, and I could only sense the passage of time. "Good morning," I whispered to the empty room. I softly called out, expecting to hear the familiar response of "good morning," but that day was different. An unsettling silence filled the room, and a deep sense of dread began to settle in. I quietly examined my father-in-law's face, and it hit me, he wasn't breathing. His usually calm and steady breaths were absent, and his face, though peaceful, showed no sign of life. When I held his hand, the warmth I'd grown used to was gone, replaced by an unnerving chill. My heart sank as I realized his heart had stopped beating. Panicked, I called for an ambulance, but grief overwhelmed me as memories of his kindness and love surged back. Tears streamed down my face as I recalled the time we spent together, the warmth of his smile, the meals we shared, and his unwavering support even after he went blind. His immense love for me would forever remain in my heart. Wiping my tears away, I gently held his hand and whispered "thank you" over and over, even though he was no longer with me. His kindness and the memories of our time together would continue to support me. As I tried to compose myself, I noticed a letterbox that reminded me of our conversation the previous night. I carefully opened it to find a business card with a lawyer's name. Tears flowed once more as I recalled his warm voice. I dialed the number on the card. After the funeral, I met with the lawyer, who revealed the details of my father-in-law's will. I had inherited more than I had ever imagined from his past company and family wealth accumulated over generations. There was even a clause stipulating that not a single penny would go to my ex-husband. It was clear how much my father-in-law had thought ahead and cared for me. I understood now why my ex-husband was unaware of this. My father-in-law had anticipated our future and kept this from him. Now, with my father-in-law's wishes close to my heart, I found myself sitting across from my ex-husband in a cafe. He looked shocked and confused as I prepared to start a new chapter of my life. With a soft, pleading tone, he said, "Lily, please forgive me. I've reflected on my mistakes. Can we start over?" His desperation was evident, but I met his plea with a smile. I looked at him and said, "Lily? Who's that?" "My name is Millie. Have you forgotten?" I placed the receipt on the table, turned on my heel, and walked out of the cafe. The fresh outdoor air was invigorating, making me feel like a new person. I headed straight to my trusted lawyer's office, equipped with all the necessary details about my ex-husband's recent whereabouts. I was determined to pursue alimony from him. Living in the apartment I had purchased with my inheritance felt like a dream. The views from the windows, the new furniture, and the fresh interior made each day fulfilling and joyful. Occasionally, my lawyer would update me on my ex-husband's situation. It seemed he had been abandoned by the daughter of the company president and had fallen into gambling. The alimony I was requesting only added to the pressure of his already strained situation. Hearing about his struggles made me even more grateful for my new life. My ex-husband tried to contact me through the lawyer, but my lawyer graciously declined on my behalf. This gesture warmed my heart and reminded me of our earlier conversations about my ex. Life was evidently tough for him now. Already burdened by gambling debts, he now had to contend with paying me alimony and juggling various jobs beyond just construction work. I hoped he would learn from his past mistakes and move forward with reflection. On the other hand, each day for me was filled with joy and excitement. My inheritance gave me the opportunity to pursue a long-held dream, opening a flower shop. My father-in-law had always enjoyed having flowers around the house, and it had been a small daily pleasure for him. In his memory, I decided to follow that dream. Now, as I stand on the brink of launching my flower shop, I feel truly joyous and content. My gratitude for my father-in-law's kindness and support is deeply etched in my heart. His legacy has helped me accept the painful past with my ex-husband. Though there are still moments of sadness and regret, I feel like I'm making progress toward my dreams every day. Recalling the days with my ex used to bring tears, but those feelings have significantly subsided. I am now embracing the journey of finding my own happiness, living life at my own pace, and working toward my goals. Each day is a small happiness in itself, and I feel incredibly fulfilled.